Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, councillors. Thank you for coming into the public for our first area forum face-to-face meeting of Central Hounslow for, what, a year and a half, I think? Yeah, very long. But it's nice to see everyone here anyway. Okay, so I'm Councillor Ajmer Garewal, Chair of the Area Forum, and I would like my colleagues to introduce themselves. It'll be so much easier. So we start from...
Councillor Nisar Malik from Hounslow Central.
Councillor Preetam Garewal from Hounslow Central.
Shahida Mehrbaan from Hounslow South.
Councillor Sohan Sumra from Hounslow West Ward. Councillor Jagdish Sharma, Hounslow West Ward.
Good evening, everyone. It's Councillor Asim from Hounslow Heath.
Tom Bruce from Hounslow South. I just made it for introductions. Delightful.
Right on time. So we've had apologies for lateness from Councillor Vikram Garewal and Councillor Chopra, yeah?
And Councillor Smith.
And Councillor Smith. Karen Smith will be a bit late, yeah.
And an apology for absence from Councillor Kiani.
Councillor Kiani's apologies are noted. Okay, any more apologies? Any more apologies? No, that's it. Okay, so any declarations of interest from members or communications? No? Okay. So with that, we go to the minutes of the meeting held on 14th of January. Wow, that was our... Oh, 14th of January. That was the online one, wasn't it?
That's the last one.
Yeah, last one. So, any accuracies, any matters arising from the minutes? So I'll take them as accurate? Yes. Okay, thank you. Sign them off. And with that, we go to item 4, which is a presentation by the West Area Borough Commander, Chief Superintendent Peter Gardner, who's very kindly given up his time to be here today. So thank you very much. And we'll have a 10-minute presentation from you and then open discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to introduce myself. I'm the BCU Commander for West Area, so that covers the boroughs of Hounslow, Hillingdon and Ealing. I want to give you a brief overview of the work we're doing in and around the Hounslow Central area and our strategic priorities around the area and results that we are getting. Before I start, if I may, I just want to address, I think, probably one of the most seismic events, certainly in my career at policing, which is around violence against women and girls, in particular in light of the terrible homicide committed against Sarah Everard by one of the very people that should have been there to protect her. Saddened, absolutely shocked, devastated when I found out, A, what had happened, and B, that it was a police officer that had committed that crime. Whilst the crime was in extreme, I think it would be remiss of me to say that we don't have pockets of misogyny within our organisation. I have zero tolerance for it. We have zero tolerance for it across the organisation. So there's 2 reviews which are going to take place across the organisation. One which has been initiated by the Home Secretary, which is going to look at our vetting processes and procedures and how this individual came to be a police officer. The other which has been launched by the Commissioner, which is going to be independently chaired and look at our culture and see if there are lessons that we can learn and how we can reduce any instances of misogyny across the organisation. Part of our response at the moment against violence against women and girls includes high visibility patrols, which we have seen in the central area, additional officers, which the Commissioner has announced, the offer of walk and talk, which PS Catherine Nottridge, who's our central sergeant here, has been running, which is gives females the opportunity to walk their commutes to and from their stations, etc., alongside a female police officer who can address any concerns they have, and obviously a real focus on offenders, especially predatory offenders and those who can commit harm against women and girls. As part of that response, in terms of the additional police officer, we're establishing 19 new town centre teams across London, These are going to be, teams are going to be put into our areas of highest demand with a real focus on violence against women and girls. And Hounslow Central is going to get one of those teams, so we are going to have a new town centre team in Hounslow that will look after not only the area in and around the town centre, but those areas alongside it also bordering it. So we're going to increase the policing resources across the centre. We'll have one new additional inspector. We'll have 3 additional sergeants and 21 additional police constables. This will be uplift over and beyond the policing resources we have already, and they'll be dedicated and focused on the town centre and the environment around it. I think that will be make a significant difference to some of the long-term challenges that we've got in the town centre, particularly around some of our historical challenges around drug dealing, antisocial behaviour, as well as obviously making it a safe environment for women and girls and all of those who use the town centre. I've started recruiting for the team already, and I hope to have the team in place early next year. I'm hoping for January, but it depends on the recruitment cycle, because obviously it's additional officers, so there'll be new officers coming in to support us on the BCU. In addition to that, we're also going to be increasing ward officers in a couple of wards. Those haven't been finalised yet, but the main bulk of the officers, new officers coming, the 1 inspector, 3 sergeants and 21 PCs will be going into the Hounslow Town Centre teams. There were a couple of questions that were put to me before this of topics I'd like that people wanted to address, particularly around drug dealing in the area, around Lambton Road, and also around Inwood Park, and also begging in the town centre. So I just want to address some of those. So we have made some arrests for possession with intent to supply drugs around the Bulstrode pub. Since we've made those arrests, we haven't had any further instances around there. We know that there's a guest house on Lambton Road that is housing some drug users at the moment, so we've been very active in that area. We've also made a number of arrests around the Inwood Park area for drug dealing, and that has significantly reduced activity in that area. We've been working particularly around the central area, around criminal behaviour orders that we've been issuing out, and strictly sticking to the conditions of those which prohibit some of our serial offenders from coming into the centre, into the town centre. We've also taken a similar approach with warnings, etc., around the beggars that are prevalent in the town centre. In terms of personnel, obviously Catherine Nottridge remains in place. We have a new sector inspector for Hounslow, who is Inspector Anil Sharma. We also have a new sergeant covering the Hounslow Heath, Hounslow West and Cranford wards, who's Sergeant Daryl Tarrant. Obviously at this point in time I don't have the names of the additional inspector or sergeants that will be coming to deal with the new town centre team and lead that team. Overall crime across Hounslow has been on a downward trend apart from a number of areas. We've reduced burglary by nearly 50%. We have reduced robbery by over 50%. Youth violence, which we measure by knife injury victims aged under 25 that are not related to domestic abuse, we've reduced by over 130%. So our key focus on violence has paid dividends. The area that I have real concern around at the moment is around violence against women and girls. We have had an increase, a marginal increase of just over 2% in domestic abuse. Obviously, we expected an increase through lockdown, and we did have a high increase earlier on in the year that has come down somewhat. We work closely with the local authority about referral pathways, etc., to address that. We've also seen an increase in rape of 3.9%, so just under 4%. The majority of that is within a domestic setting as opposed to stranger rape. And we have seen an increase of over 27% of other sexual offences. So this is touching, sexting in terms of when children go back to school, exchanging images, etc. Again, more than 50% of this has been within a domestic setting as opposed to within a stranger setting. So that is clearly our focus at the moment. It is clearly our focus from a strategic as well as a local operational perspective. And the investment in the town centre team is part of our strategy to address that. I'm happy to take any questions or queries or comments that anybody would like to address, if that's okay.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. And that's great news about the town centre recruitments. We definitely need a lot more presence in the high street, and that's lovely. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Nisar Malik.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to hear about the reduction in crime. Do you think to some extent it is due to the COVID-19 and a lot of people have been actually almost lockdown condition, or is it actually the reduction is due to the police work?
I think there's an element of both. When the figures I'm comparing are not against last year when we were locked down, but against prior to last year, so they against 2 years ago, where we saw that. So what I've been most impressed by the work the officers done is we've sustained and increased those reductions since the end of the lockdown period. So I had anticipated an increase, particularly in acquisitive crime at the end of lockdown, such as burglary and robbery, as people came out into the streets again. We haven't seen that. We've had a very active hotspots patrol strategy around our area, our high-risk areas, and that seems to have paid dividends. Combined with that, we've been very active around our offender management. We probably have the most robust offender management strategy in the Met locally here, and I think that has paid dividends. So there's definitely an element of lockdown on it. I think the lockdown gave people an opportunity to perhaps consider the paths they were taking and defer them from crime. But a lot of it is due to good old-fashioned police work. I think crime in many respects is quite simple. If you are on top of your offenders that commit crime and you're in the places where crime is committed, you'll prevent it from happening. And that's the approach we've taken.
Chair, I've just got one small question, if I may. Can I? Thank you.
Yeah.
Losing police officers is not always a good idea for the community, which has been going on for a number of years, reduction after reduction after reduction. Now, obviously, it got to the point where you now start getting more officers to come on board. Isn't there any ceiling from the crime prevention or from sort of method that you don't go below that ceiling? Otherwise, you're really touching the bone. So that is something which I don't know. It's come to, it is why we have to lose train officers, and then you employ a new one, and then you train and money and time and all that sort of thing while the community suffers. So there's got to be some sort of a system and a ceiling where you say, hang on, we have really now come to the bottom of it. We can't let more officers go. So is there something which is actually in discussion?
Obviously, quite often, policing numbers are not an operational decision, rather a political decision, and we did lose and reduce our officer numbers quite considerably under the period of austerity. I think nationally, we lost about 16% of police officers across the country. We had a slight stay of execution in the Met because obviously we had to maintain officer numbers for the Olympics, but then we did lose officers after that. Clearly, I am an operational police officer rather than a politician, so I wouldn't want to comment on the rights or wrongs of reducing officers, but there's definitely a ceiling at which policing becomes difficult. I would say in my most recent history, my challenge has been not having enough police officers, whereas my challenge now is the levels of experience. So as we get more officers in, we have to play catch up and get them up to an experience level, which means that they are more effective at what they do. And that is a challenge for us at the moment. We do have a very good training team. We actually run the what we call our street patrol duties, where we train our young officers after they come out of training schools. We actually run that out of Uxbridge Police Station, but that's for the whole of the BCU, but we also deploy them here locally. So it is a challenge getting the experience up, but they're fast learners and they're doing a really good job. And I'd rather have the challenge of a lack of experience than the challenge of a lack of officer numbers.
Councillor Rhythm Garibal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commander, for a nice presentation.
Thank you.
And I'm sure my colleagues from Hounslow Centre will be very, very happy in January when you bring 21 officers, sergeant and an inspector there, which is well needed.
Thank you.
I regularly go to neighborhood meetings. My neighborhood team is quite active. Like you forgot to mention Kingsley Road, and there's a couple of alleyways. There are still a lot of antisocial behavior going on, drugs and all that. But the police know, I think they're on top, well, they're getting on top of now. Anyway, my question is just to take it from Mr. Malik. I know you're getting new officers, but we lost a lot of police stations and obviously a lot of vehicles and other things. Is there any money or funds for that, or how would you tackle that?
Yes, so obviously the estate, the policing estate, is owned by MOPAC, and the estate decisions are made in conjunction with MOPAC. We were due to lose Felton Police Station. That is now being retained, which I think is good news. So, and you know, we've invested heavily in Hounslow Central Police Station. You've seen it's been completely refurbished. So we are investing quite considerably in a local estate within the borough with the refurbishment of Hounslow. Now have confirmation from MOPAC that we are retaining Felton Police Station, which is good news. So our response teams for this sector will continue to be based out of Felton Police Station, and our public protection officers will remain based out of Hounslow Police Station. So, so we are investing in the estate locally. Obviously, like everybody, we've had to tighten our belt over the years, and some of the police stations that we've lost, you know, were for good reason because they weren't utilised. We're also putting more fleet into our neighbourhood officers to allow them to get around the BCUs, around the boroughs better. Ultimately, I prefer my neighbourhood officers to be on foot because then they integrate more with the public, are visible, etc. But I do recognise that from time to time we do need to provide adequate fleet for them, etc. So we are investing in both fleet and estate on the borough.
Councillor Vikram Gariwal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, for your presentation. I think Councillor Preetham Garal makes a really important point because I'm from Hounslow Heath Ward, so what we often saw there was, especially in the Heath, our police, local police team, who are fantastic, so fantastic that our constable got nabbed by Hounslow South, which is a bit of a sore subject, but they were chasing people, you know, doing antisocial behaviour or causing antisocial behaviour in the Heath that were on mopeds with bicycles. And I don't believe they even have a vehicle in a couple of our wards, Hounslow South and Heath. It's a real dire situation. So that fleet has been clearly neglected due to, you know, we know the austerity measures and the effects of those, but they really need to be replenished and quite urgently. So I'm glad to hear that. I've got a question about hotspots. So obviously the Heath, we've made a huge investment in there, and hopefully, you know, we've secured the perimeters and what have you to stop antisocial behaviour occurring there. But you still see a lot of drinking. I mean, I went there 2 weeks ago on a Saturday at 9 a.m. And you saw 3 gentlemen drinking alcohol at that time, right near the entrance of Hounslow Heath. So these areas need to be identified a bit more. Also Lambda Park, where I go daily, on the weekends in particular, you see a lot of drug dealing, and unfortunately, it's often in that bridge underneath, where the TfL line goes. So possibly we could have lighting there that might prevent drug dealing going on there. But I certainly think Hounslow Central obviously is an important ward, and with the high street there for footfall, but it often spills over into Hounslow Heath, Hounslow South and other wards. So it'd be great to hear about the recruitment progress on that side, because I know there were vacancies and problems with filling those vacancies as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think a couple of things. Firstly, I'll deal with the vacancies. So we did have difficulty in getting people across to Hounslow because of the uncertainty of the future of Felton Police Station, etc., where a lot of our neighbourhood officers based. With the certainty of that now, we do have people in place. So we are posting people this month, so all the vacancies across the sector will be filled, which I think is good news. The second thing I'll say is we work quite closely with the Designing Out Crime team, so I will ask them to have a look exactly at that issue, whether we can put lighting in there in the underpass, whether that will help solve the problem. Because certainly if they're using that on a regular basis, we should have an effective response to that. Just around the chasing of people on mopeds and scooters, generally when that happens, we would prefer our response teams to do the chasing rather than our neighbourhoods teams. who have the adequate fleet. I'm also was previously the bronze commander for Operation Venice, which was the Met Ride operation targeting scooters, where we took quite aggressive tactics, including knocking people off their bikes, etc., and deployed motorcycles after them, and so on and so forth. So we do have tactics we can use when it's appropriate, though obviously the level of skill required to deploy those tactics is extremely high, and is a lot of investment and training for those very specialized officers. So that wouldn't be appropriate for our neighbours officers to use, but they can always request that support to them if they are facing that issue, and I'll have a word with them and discuss what we can do to try and address those issues.
Councillor Sharma, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask two questions. First one is, in view of the incidents in the other boroughs, what additional steps you have taken here in Hanslow in view of the also rise, when you said 27% increase in sexual offences? Have you taken some more steps to make sure that the confidence level in Hanslow of the ladies is not shaken?
Yeah. I think, if I'm perfectly honest, I think confidence is shaken across the board. From the incident that was perpetrated by Wayne Couzens, the fact that that was a police officer, the fact that the methodology he used was, abusing his police powers, I think it will take us a long time to fully recover the confidence amongst women and girls, because that is an incident that is beyond the pale, absolutely shocking, and doesn't reflect the values of myself, my fellow officers, from any extent. It is going to take time to get that confidence back. I'm acutely aware of that. But I think the measures I outlined earlier will go some way to doing that. We have increased our visible patrols in the area. So we are putting more officers out and about in the streets in our high footfall areas and our commuter areas. We also, obviously, the investment in officers that we're talking about is part of addressing that. I think one of the things which I'm really quite enthusiastic about is the initiative taken by Catherine Nottage, who's obviously the sergeant here, which is around the walk and talk, where they're offering those up to female commuters to walk the commutes with them, to talk to them, discuss their fears and concerns, etc. That will go a long way to addressing some of those concerns. We're also obviously focusing quite considerably on offenders, predatory offenders. We have the most active predatory offender unit in the Met, and it's based out of Hounslow Police Station. Since that unit was introduced in November last year, we've made an arrest every single day, and that's for predatory offences like stalking, sexual touching, etc., abuse, and so on and so forth. More than 50% of the offences that we talked about take place within a domestic or familial or within the same residence. So it's difficult for us to get ahead of that, because obviously that is within a closed setting. Where we have known offenders, we obviously work very closely with the local authority and have interventions and strategies around that. So our high-risk domestic abuse offenders, what we call our dauntless nominals, we have plans against each of those individuals. Anybody who comes to notice for high harm or that we feel poses a harm to women and girls goes through a multi-agency framework, including the local authority and ourselves. So we do have a lot of measures in place. But I do recognize that it is going to take time to build confidence back up amongst women and girls, because what will happen is just, to be honest, it's just so unimaginable. It's understandable that confidence has been knocked. So it is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But we have to show through our actions and our investment where we're putting our officers, the actions we're taking both in the public domain and also the actions we take internally in terms of the review of our culture, that these are the steps that we need to take to slowly start to rebuild that confidence.
And secondly, my second question is about, in the past we used to...
So, Councillor Sharma, sorry, you're on mute. Can you push your microphone?
Oh, sorry. In the past, we used to have police officer on foot, and also we used to have regular meeting with the officers. So that we used to talk on the cup of tea, and that were appreciated by us as members, because about our ward activities, every area, what is happening, and any different type of offences that were committed, more or less, and particularly about these drugs. We have a problem sometime in the Beavers Park, often, sometimes, had been many cases. So about these things, neither, now I can see that because of the COVID-19 and the police, nobody was going to meet anybody. But is there any plan to start again that officers and members, elected members, should meet, whether they meet in the office or we will welcome them anytime they have, and have a cup of tea and just we'll have 10-15 minutes discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So all the wards should have ward panel meetings with the officers. I know that the bulk of those have been done virtually, as you rightfully say, due to the pandemic. I know that's not suitable for everybody, so we are going to be introducing again those ward panel meetings in person, which I think is much more effective and efficient. So I'm sorry that your experience hasn't been that hasn't been taking place. I'll make sure it does take place going forward.
Councillor Mehraban.
I just want to pick up on a couple of things that the other councillors have spoken about. We keep talking about misogyny and recently what's happened, and it's absolutely dreadful what has happened. However, when you look around the borough, not just this borough, but any borough, you'll see that there's hardly any trust in the police. Right from the beginning, the police have been racist, they've been abusing their power. I mean, you know it better than we do. So if you need any help or you want to go to a trusted person, a lot of people would say the police are not them. Now, you talk about cuts and how it's all political, and it is, and we agree with that. However, when you're cutting down on police stations or cutting down on numbers, how do you ever think that you're going to be able to reach to the point of where the public can trust you again? It's impossible. It's really impossible. You're talking about training now for the new officers, but where was the training before? I mean, I've been involved, not personally, but I've been involved with so many police cases for other people, and all of the time, police have been abusing their power. Now, where was the training then? And where is the training now? You say you're going to train all these people up because we've got this case that is absolutely awful. But where was the police before? You know, does it not make sense that people just do not trust the police? Because that is exactly what they do. They are the police. They are supposed to be there to protect us, but it doesn't really work that way. Also, you talk about Bobby and the Beat. Now, we've been told for ages that, yeah, they will be there in every single ward, walking. But I live in one ward, but I'm a councillor in another ward. Now, both of my wards, I've not seen them out and about at all. So where are they? We have a meeting now and again. And when you say to them, oh, we wanted to talk to you about a certain crime, there's oh, you should have dialed that number. But when you dial that number, no one picks it up. We seem to be going round and round in circles about how the police are doing this and they're doing that. But constructively, there's not a lot that's happening. And more of it seems to be talking rather than actions. I mean, where is our Bobby on the Beat? We've been promised that for ages. I'm in Hounslow South. I've not seen one. So I don't know. It's a lot of talk, and a lot of promises. But I always think that I've been here for such a long time. None of it's been delivered so far. Sorry.
Thank you. If I may, I think in terms of dedicated ward officers, I will find out why there's vacancies, but I know we do have vacancies, and as I said, we have now appointed people to those vacancies and they will be filled. I do think it is unfair to say that we all abuse our powers. I don't think that's fair at all. I think that we have had issues in the past and we have to acknowledge that. But I think that the majority of police officers join because they want to make a difference and they want to make people's lives better. That's certainly why I joined the police. I joined the police because I want to make a difference. I want to help people. So whilst I acknowledge that we've had problems in the past, I think to have a sweeping statement that we always abuse our powers, and that I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's helpful. We have invested an incredible amount since McPherson in and around stamping out racism across the organisation. We know that there's pockets that it exists, and we know that we still dismiss officers from time to time where we see it, where it happens, where it occurs. We know that misogyny exists within our organisation, and we know that where it comes across, where it occurs, etc., we stamp it out and those people get fired. I don't think there's a lack of will to change. I don't think there's a lack of effort on behalf of our officers. I think our present commission has done more around violence against women and girls, around stamping out discriminatory behaviour in the organisation than certainly anybody in my time in the policing. We are not perfect, and I wouldn't suggest for a second that we are perfect. But I think the vast majority of our officers wake up in the morning and come into this job because they want to make a difference and they want to help people. And I'm sorry that the experience of the people that you've dealt with has been around abuse of power. That's certainly not my experience across the board. I know it exists. Where I've seen it, I've fired people. I've got rid of them from the organisation because I don't share those values, and neither does the organisation. But we are investing in this space. I think a commitment of 650 officers is a significant investment. We don't control overall officer numbers. We rely on government for that. The 650 officers are part of the government pledge to raise officer numbers by 20,000. We don't make the decisions about reducing officer numbers, etc. Total officers are appointed to us by the Home Office. But I do think that we do, we're not perfect, as I said, but I do think that we do act. It's not just talking. I think that we've made significant improvements in our organisation to get rid of discrimination. I know we're not there yet. I know we've still got a long way to go. But I think that the will is there, the commitment is there, and the actions are taking place.
Sorry if I may just come in. I mean, that's all very well what you've said, and I believe some of it as well. However, to get to the core of the problem is a big task. And it's like ongoing all of the time. So even though you may be working harder than you were before, but when is the problem going to end? That your own people, your own staff are like that. It's a shame.
I think it's starting to change. I definitely believe it. So if I look at our staff now, we're trying to become more representative of the communities we police. Across West area, so the 3 boroughs that I represent, more than 50% of our new applications for police officer roles are from people from ethnic minorities. Our levels of confidence in policing are over 60, I think it's about 65% in Hounslow, which is particularly high. It does go as high as 70% from time to time. So I believe it is changing. I think we're an organisation of 35,000 people. We will always have issues, but the main thing is we need to be making progress against those issues every single day. And we will. I don't think we'll ever get an organisation of our size to a position where we're 100% perfect. But we have to keep fighting against those that come into our organisation that believe they can act in a misogynist manner, a racist manner, discriminatory manner. Those are absolutely counter to our values, counter to my personal values, counter to the values of our commissioner. And we are determined to stamp that out, and we move forward every day. But we're not perfect, and I know we've got a long way to go.
Thank you for that. I do believe we are one of the luckier boroughs than certain. Our crime rates are bad, but not as bad as some boroughs are. Councillor Azim?
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for your very informative presentation. Considering that offences of a sexual nature actually increased within the borough, and the majority of offences actually take place within a domestic setting, how can we ensure that females are protected within the domestic setting? It's well enough having officers patrolling and increased patrolling outside, but how do we safeguard women within their own homes?
Yeah. It is incredibly difficult. what we try and do is we make the referral pathways as open and transparent as possible. So we work closely with schools, with doctors, with the hospitals, London Ambulance Service, as well as community groups and through the local authority. So we make those pathways available because obviously we are not present in people's homes. We don't know what happens behind closed doors. What we have to do is make sure that there are pathways that if people have concerns, they can report them and know that will be addressed. That's our best way of doing it, is to encourage people coming forward. And certainly a lot of the increase we've seen in sexual offences has been because of publicity around some of the issues that we're facing at the moment, which has encouraged people, more people to come forward. So we have to make sure two things. One is those pathways are clear, understood, and available and accessible to people. And secondly, that when people do go down those pathways, they receive a response which encourages them, which supports them, and which gives them, you know, the outcome that they're looking for and the support that they need. And that's not just policing. Sometimes the support comes from the local authority, sometimes it's medical, etc. But we have to make sure that A, we have the pathways open and available, and secondly, the response, once people use those pathways, is appropriate.
Thank you.
Councillor Bruce.
Thank you very much. I mean, I have to say, thank you very much for all that you've said. I mean, my overwhelming interaction with the police is very positive on the whole. I think I completely agree with you. I like politicians who also get a bad rap. Most of us and most of you come to work in order to make a difference and trying to do a good job. We don't always do that. We don't always do exactly what others want or expect. And I think with the police in particular, you have taken a hit recently on confidence, quite clearly, but also because we hold you up to probably the highest of expectations, higher than anything else. I mean, if my interaction with a Sky customer service person on the phone is not as I want it to be, it's annoying, but for me, it's not the be-all and end-all. But if my interaction with a police officer isn't as I expect it to be, it will, and as it does for most people, annoy us far more for far longer, and really get under our skin and think about and make us think, are the police doing what they should be doing? And Councillor Mehrban, while I don't, Councillor Mehrban, agree with everything you said, I do understand that there are lots in our community who've had very not so positive interaction on many occasions for the reasons she raises. I want to thank you for acknowledging the Sarah Everard issue and the fact that you've said the things that are going into, you know, the things that you're going to do to try and sort it out. I have 3 daughters, and before my daughters were born, a police officer came into my wife's school, and there was discussion with some of the children, and the overwhelming thought was, oh, you know, you've got to be careful of the police because they're going to take you, if you're naughty, they're going to take you away, in a joking way. And he said afterwards to her, I really don't like that. Well, he wasn't having a go at her, he was just saying, I really don't like that. I wish people would say, the police are there to help you. So we've been very clear with our daughters, that is what we say. She saw one of my daughters saw a police officer in the last year or so, and he was on the train and said something to her, and my wife said, oh, and what do the police do? Oh, they help us. And he was visibly shocked. I don't think he'd probably heard that. And I think that is the kind of messaging we need to be saying, while understanding that and acknowledging that you do, there are issues within that. So thank you for that. My second point is to do with the exploitation that you were talking about. There is the sexual exploitation of young people that has been talked about very much in the last few years. And more recently, particularly the criminal exploitation of young people. This is becoming more and more of an issue in Hounslow. My concern, and I was umming and ahhing whether to raise this, but I am going to say it publicly, because as you're here, I think it's important that it's said and that you hear this. Some of the officers, I'm the lead member for Education and Children's Services, and some of the discussions I've been having recently about adolescent criminal exploitation within adolescents recently, and the interaction the officers have been having with some of your colleagues, has been that it is very difficult for us to do. We will react, but it's hard for us to do any prevention. And that is hard for us to hear, because lots of the aims within children's services and social care is focused on trying to prevent, because clearly that's much better than elsewhere. I mean, I am, you know, this is a discussion that's been going on a long time, and I'm saying it in a few sentences, so I'm not, you know, giving it any great detail than perhaps it deserves. But I would, you know, I'd like you to take away the message from me. Like, I hope it goes down to lots in your team, that interactions with boroughs and particularly senior officers about how we are going to be dealing with this criminal exploitation, because they are not criminal. You know, young people, a 13-year-old is not a criminal. And I think it's important that we all acknowledge that, as much as a 13-year-old girl being forced to do certain acts is not a prostitute, and we've accepted that very recently. We should be accepting the other very strongly within our community, but trying to prevent that, and how we do that, disrupting things. So that sort of, you know, back and forth has been a challenge in the last few weeks. So I don't know if you might not have any particular comment on that, but I just thought it's important you hear.
I think, if I can, firstly, thank you for the kind words. I think one of the things I would say is that it's right that we are held to a higher standard as police officers. We have powers which are not given to the general public, so I think it's fair and right that we hold ourselves to a higher standard, and I think it is appropriate. And when I hear that, you know, I know we don't get it right all the time, and I know we let people down from time to time, and I think it's important we acknowledge that, and we try and rectify it where we do so. I think around criminal exploitation, it is difficult. So our youth offending team, our yachts team, work very closely with the local authority, and that's around diverting young people who have entered that criminal pathway and trying to get them out of the criminal justice system. So we do a lot of work with young people to try and divert them once they come to notice from the criminal, from a criminal pathway. Around the more severe exploitation, we're talking about things like county lines and work like that. We are a lot more effective, I think, than we have ever been before. We didn't really grasp the problem perhaps 5 years ago. We run Operachi now, which is a Met-wide. It's actually a national project now. It started in the Met, and that is really effective. We've actually closed down a number of county lines coming in and out of Hounslow as part of that. Where we find young people that have been exploited as part of the county line, the default option is not to prosecute those people and bring them into the criminal justice system. It's to try and divert them and bring them into the youth offending teams and try and divert them away from criminality. Obviously, those who choose to exploit and those that are exploiting others generally end up within the criminal justice system, because we want to stomp that out. In terms of preventing people, you know, that's once people come to notice. So once they've been mentioned on an intelligence report, or we've arrested somebody and they've been associated with them at the time of arrest, etc., then they come into that criminal justice arena where our youth offending team is looking at them. Prior to that, in terms of if they're not coming to notice to us, if they're not on intelligence report, it's very difficult for us to get ahead of that. So we do our preventative work through our schools programs and the work that the officers do in schools, and the Your Life, You Choose programs and like that. These are all preventative programs to try and show children that there's alternatives to criminality, to try and get them to engage and look at, you know, options outside of that. But it is difficult, because you don't know at that point which children are more vulnerable than not. If it's children that have come to the notice of either us at a young age, or to the local authority, or from a medical perspective, we put a Merlin on, which is shared amongst all the statutory partners, that will then come into that multi-agency response, which might well be picking up the factors that would normally lead to someone being more likely to be involved in criminality. So we do look at families, and we do look at children within families through that framework, but it is difficult. So I'd say we've got the multi-agency response, which is around families and children within those families that come to notice. We've got the preventive work we do in schools, and the Your Life, You Choose, and the citizens programs, etc. We've got those children that have come to notice, which go through the youth offending teams, and then we've got the higher levels of exploitation, which go into the Operachi program.
Thank you for that. I mean, you know, all the preventative work that you were talking about, I'm fully aware of, and I should have said that there is a lot of good preventative work that you do, your YOS teams and working with our YOS teams and, the stuff you do in schools and all the other things you just talked about. I think it's important for us to acknowledge in Hounslow we are not a gangs borough, not designated gangs borough. There is not the serious gangs issue that some other London boroughs do have. I think what it is, and my concern, politically, but also for my children growing up here, is that I don't want to become a gangs borough. And there is gang activity among young people that is, not is not what we want here, and could potentially escalate into more serious issues. So I think it's there is all that great work going on, but it's just about being, as preventative as we can be together. And while the Merlins go in and a lot of those things, there is kind of a sort of, well, is this social care? Should this be the police? And there's kind of a sort of pushback from both sides, I would accept. And some of that seems to, I hear this, that it's not being left, but perhaps not being dealt with as collectively and as in a partnership. And I would throw in health into that. There's a number of multifaceted issues here. So it's really good to hear what you've said, and you're absolutely right about the work you do. But I just think it needs to be certainly continued, if not enhanced. Thank you.
If I may, I agree. I think it's key that we work in partnership. There's no way we can solve this as a sole agency. Neither can health, neither can social services. So I think the continuation of partnership working is critical. The main gang we have in West London is the N gang, which is based out of Northolt. We have seen them in Hounslow. We have arrested them in Hounslow. We have seen them encroaching on this territory. We do have quite a significant visible operation taking place. We have the territorial support group in at the moment, working in and around the N gang, which are perhaps one of our more difficult challenges at the moment. So they've been linked to a number of homicides over the past year. They're in conflict with a number of other associations. So we do see that spill over from time to time. But my job and the job of my office is to try and contain that, prevent it as much as we can, and where it does happen, make sure that we react to it appropriately. But it is a challenge. It definitely is a challenge.
Thank you. Councillor Malik, very quickly, please.
Very quickly. Obviously, we do have criticism. We all, each other will do it all the time. But I must praise the police. You're still in number 2 after God. If anybody has a problem, the second thing they remember, let's call the police. So there is a lot of confidence. And I think the criticism is there, constructive criticism, which my fellow councillors done. Yeah. And I think it is a good thing that we share with each other. So I would just like to say thank you to the police for the hard work you guys do.
No, thank you very much. And please, I don't want to come across as defensive, and I apologise if I did, because I know that we do have challenges and I know that we do have problems. But most police officers wake up in the morning to try and make things better for everybody. I'm not saying that we don't let people down from time to time, because I know that we do. But my job and the job of my fellow leadership team is to make sure that those times where we let people down are less frequent, that we stamp out any forms of discrimination, and that we make, ultimately we make policing, make people have as much confidence in policing, no matter what ethnicity they're from, what gender they are, what sexuality they are. They should all have the same confidence that they'll get the same treatment for us across the board. So I thank you for your kind words.
Thank you. I know how hard it is. My brother and my niece are both in the police. Okay, it's not very often that we get the borough commander here. So what I'm going to do is open it to the public. If you have any questions, please feel free. Anybody? Sandy?
One thing is, I'll probably be unpopular for saying this, but the hysteria about the current situation is doing more damage than good. I think that people are becoming scared, and the encouragement, mainly by the press, of feeling that we can't trust the police is not helping people. I think that there are rotten apples in every barrel, and it's very rare. So I would like to say that I feel that we've still got to make sure that we have got confidence in the police, because if we haven't, then we are going to become very much more unable to live our daily lives. I mean, my 80-year-old cousin rang me up and said she couldn't go out because she might get attacked and she couldn't tell a policeman. And I said, you know, get over it, stop talking about this. But it's very important that we remember how valuable it is that we do have a decent police force. Secondly, I would like to talk about, all my councillors get fed up with me about this, e-scooters, which I think are quite lethal, and not just for us pedestrians, but also for the kids that are riding around on them at the moment at very high speeds. Now, I know I have been onto our local police, and they are doing the best they can, and they haven't got the manpower to do it. But it does show that people can do some things. Everybody knows they're illegal. The neighbourhood group posts that they're illegal, and yet it's blatant law breaking that everybody is able to see. And I do feel that maybe there ought to be more action taken to stop this law breaking, because it's so obvious. And I mean, I really don't want to be knocked over by a scooter, because at my age, having a broken hip could be very life limiting. But also, I don't want to have to see young man's brains on the pavement where they've gone so fast and some terrible accident has happened. I don't know if there's any other way that we could help the police to stop this. I mean, the schemes in other boroughs, I know, don't make an awful lot of difference, because people still have the private scooters that they bought themselves. But that's really what I'd like to ask about.
Thank you, if I may, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the press and how they choose to report, obviously I can't comment, but my message to the public would be, have confidence. We are there to help. If you have concerns, what I've told my officers is, if you have to interact with somebody, especially if it's a lone female, be proactive. Show them the CAD number. Tell them before they have to ask. So have confidence, because we are there to help. Around e-scooters, I've actually recently had a discussion with the leader about e-scooters, the challenges around e-scooters. Obviously, we have trials in neighbouring boroughs, which makes it a bit trickier. On e-scooters itself, we have a multi-pronged approach that we're taking with it. On the first part, we're working quite closely with industry and insurance companies to make sure, because we know that these are being sold without the adequate warnings that they're illegal, etc. So there's a lot of work we're doing around that. In terms of the actual work we do on a day-to-day basis, so we run OpCubo, which we do was most recently in Chiswick Town Centre and then in Hounslow Town Centre, whereas we get a central team, including our Roads and Transport Policing Command, and we will hit a particular spot for the day, stopping everybody on a scooter, seizing scooters, etc. I had an officer injured just yesterday, stitches in his hand from stopping somebody on an e-scooter. So we do actively go after them. We do have a challenge, though, is that we don't have a suitable tactical option if somebody makes off on an e-scooter. We cannot be chasing them in vehicles, etc., when they're on e-scooters. The risk to that individual of some sort of catastrophic accident is too high. They offer no protection. So we don't have a viable tactic of sort of chasing them per se, because of the danger is significantly high. We are looking at options, including stunning them, because most of them are electric, etc. But those are unproven options. So we do not have effective tactical options that we can sort of chase somebody and knock them off the scooter. The risk to the individual is too high. I do recognise the challenge they cause. I do recognise the antisocial nature of the way that they're driven. And that's why we run our OpCubos on a regular basis. So we've had at least 2 this month, I think, in the town centre and in Chiswick. But it's not enough. And I certainly know the risk. I used to run CID on Southwest when the first lady was killed on an e-scooter in the roundabout in Battersea. So I was part of that investigation. So I do know the risks and dangers that these vehicles pose. I think there is a challenge for us in terms of communications around the illegality of them and the risk that they pose, and that is part of our approach. But it is a difficult topic to challenge, but we are regularly doing OpCubos in and across the borough, tackling those who are on e-scooters.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's getting like families are riding on them now, aren't
Yes.
they? They normally have their
Yeah.
children with them. Any other questions?
Sorry, just to bring up on the electric side and scooters.
Would you just take the mic? Thank you.
Cheers. Hi. I just wanted to ask you sort of the current law and status on electric actual e-bikes, because are they approved as well, or are they insured? Do you know what's your current
Yeah, so-
status on that sort of side of it? Because we're not quite sure
Yeah, so,
ourselves.
so if it's a bicycle, it can be legally ridden as a bicycle, an electric cycle, as long as it, I think the limit, I'll double check, but I think it's 25 miles an hour is the limit. If a bike has been doctored or something like that to go above that speed, then it's illegal. Yeah.
Councillor Meherban.
Just a quick question. Talking about bikes, we've got cycle lanes, so really that's what they should be using. But I live on the Great West Road, and today there was a gentleman riding his bike on the Great West Road. Now, what do you do about that? Because it happens quite a lot.
I mean, obviously, certainly I would be encouraging them to take the cycle lane. They're putting themselves at risk by riding in the middle of a busy road. Obviously, that individual case I can't talk to, but if I did come across it, that would be, you know, my officers, I would expect them to stop him and tell him to get in the cycle lane, if I'm honest, because they're posing a risk to themselves.
So really, there's no law that says that they can't ride on
No,
the busy
there's
road?
laws around riding on highways and fast roads, but it depends which part of the Great Western Road it's on, what the speed limit is, etc. But I would expect if we saw somebody on a cycle that's putting themselves at risk, we'd be moving them onto the cycle lane. If it's on a fast road that they cannot cycle on, then we can take action, including seizing their bike if we need to.
Any more questions?
Sorry, I don't want to labour about e-scooters. You said at the end of your response to Sandy about the messaging and the communications. I mean, I think that is fundamentally the thing. I don't think most people know they're illegal. I'm a teacher as well as being a counsellor, and it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, sitting around the staff room table and talking about it. And are they illegal? Are they? I thought you could, because you can hire them and you could really, but you can buy them and you can do it. I just don't. I don't think that's really clear. You know, I'd like to see billboards, adverts on TV, on the internet, things that are very clear. It is illegal. We will take this off you. Now, it's clearly not going to stop everyone, but I think it would have an effect, and it would certainly be very proactive, saying this is the situation. We need to be clear. These are a thing. We need to deal with it. You need to help us do that. It's probably a bit beyond you being able to, produce these adverts yourself. But that is something I do think is something that we need to be doing.
Completely agree.
Lovely. Thank you very, very much, Chief Superintendent Gardner. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, we will go. Sorry.
Sorry, briefly, I just want to say thank you for the time for hearing me. If anybody's got individual issues that I want to pick on, particularly some of the experience you've had where it's been negative, I'd really like to look into those. So please feel free to email me, and then I can pick it up. I think you've got my email, so I'll try and pick up those individual issues or anything that anybody wants to ask, which I weren't able to ask in the forum. I'll be more than happy to pick that up. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll pass that message to all the councillors with your email address. Thank you. Sorry, we'll just take a break for 2 minutes, please.
7 pages of talking. It's more than some meetings.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we'll go on to item 5 now, which is the open forum for questions from the public. And we have had 3 written questions, which Bill will read out, please. Thank you.
People have sent in 3 written questions. Essentially, they're all the same questions. We've had them from Mr. John Dale, a member of the public who asked to remain anonymous, and Ms. Abigail Hardy-Miller. I'm going to read out Ms. Miller's, but they're all on the same subject and all very similar, so I won't waste everybody's time reading out all 3. No offence to the other 2 people, but it was the same question. So Ms. Miller has written, in Witton Road, Hounslow, the council has been carrying out rooftop developments. The noise, leaks and construction work have turned residents' lives into a living hell, as can be seen in a video on Brentford Plus Today TV. I have launched a borough-wide petition to stop these developments, which may soon affect my own home in Field Lane, Brentford. This is addressed to members. Do you support the work in Witton Road? What do you say to residents enduring this nightmare? Would you like to live in those conditions for one day, never mind a year or more? And we have a...
You're going to make me... Oh, I still can't see that. Can I read that? Okay, so during the rooftop development works at Witton Road, the council were made aware of reports of water ingress in some properties on the existing top floor. United Living have taken full responsibility for this and have met affected households jointly with the council to assess the damage within the property and also to apologise about the disruption caused. We have temporarily rehoused 2 leaseholders from the top floor and offered alternative accommodation to other affected flats, but this offer has not been taken up by any other residents. Following on from this, every affected home has been inspected and a schedule of remedial works has been agreed with the resident occupiers. The new roof is now completed and there have been no further reports of any water leaks. United Living and the council will continue to monitor construction works on site and will ensure that the works are carried out safely with minimal disruption to residents. Residents are being kept updated via regular communications to let them know what works are being carried out in advance. An initial compensation payment of £1,000 has been paid to affected residents with a commitment to rectify any damage to furnishings and decorations. The remedial works are currently being programmed by the contractor and dates for when the works will be carried out will be agreed directly with the residents. So that is the response from the council because they are keeping on top of the works being carried out. I think that answers all 3 of the questions, does it, Bill, if they were all similar?
The same.
All right.
All on the same subject.
Thank you. And do we have any more written questions? No, just the 3. Okay. Normally we do request written questions, but seeing that you are all here, I will say that if there is a question you would like to ask, we will try and answer it tonight, or we will take it away and come back to you. So if anyone has any questions they would like to ask, please feel free. No? Okay. Thank you for that. And with that, we will move on to then item 6. Which is the Hounslow Council Recovery Renewal and Renewal Programme. And we've got Sarah Philby. Thank you.
Chair, while they're getting set up, can I just make a comment about your the last item?
Yes, please.
I think you know, what you've just done, you've responded to the question, questions have been submitted, you've asked the audience. I think that's, you know, demonstrates our commitment to openness and transparency. You know, that might not be agreed by everybody, but I think it's very, you know, there's been some comments I've seen recently where we're trying to hide things. We are perfectly happy always to answer any questions individually by being written to, or in a public forum like this. So I would encourage anyone watching this on YouTube later who feels, well, my councillor or my area is not responding to things that we should be doing, please write to this forum and we will do our best to respond to it in a shorter time as possible, either directly now or in a written form later, or with a phone call or a follow-up email. And also feel free to attend where possible and ask your question in person. So your commitment to that and what's happened just now, I think, demonstrates that, and I would encourage all to do that.
Yep, definitely so, because we have asked, we contacted all resident associations and invited everyone along, whoever has any sort of questions, but maybe next time people feel more happier.
Chair, I think we've got someone's raising their hand in the audience.
Yes, please. Yeah, sure.
I'm Abigail Hardy-Miller, who was leading a borough-wide petition to... Say that again, sorry? Oh, I'm Abigail Hardy-Miller. I've set up a borough-wide petition against the rooftop developments. I really don't think that the comments that you've actually said there from Steve Curran today are true. I think he's passing the buck. I think the council are passing the buck. I think the people in Witton Road have lived in this condition for nearly 2 years. It's all right offering £1,000. We don't want £1,000. We want to live, as our human rights say that we can, in peace and harmony. People are working from home. People just want to live. People are disabled. People are elderly. They can't get in and out safely. There are safety problems there as well. I just have to say that I really don't agree what Mr. Curran actually said today in his film, and that's that. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for that. As you're aware, I mean, I haven't been to the site, so I don't know, but as you say, we are trying our best. Health and safety is our preference, of course, and I'm sure we'll take this up with Councillor Curran as well. Thank you. Yes, please. Hello.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. Say you
Can
haven't
speak
been there.
in the mic.
Hello, this is Chada here. I'd just like to say that you say you haven't been there. Maybe you guys should take a tour there and maybe stay there for a few hours and then check it out and then do a response. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure where Councillor Curran gave his response, he has definitely been there, and yeah, and the officers have been there, but we do take what you say on board, and thank you. Okay, seeing we had moved on from the open forum but came back to it, so we'll come back to you. The recovery plan now. Thank you. Over to you, Sarah.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Sarah Philby. I'm the Recovery and Renewal Programme Director, and I'm joined this evening. I'm sorry, Kate's name wasn't on the agenda, and she's not got a name badge, but Kate Bull, who's the Head of Economic Regen...
Economic Recovery and Regeneration.
Economic Recovery and Regeneration. Too many R's in our titles. So I've got a few slides to run through. Shouldn't take too long. Just a quick reminder that we, the council, partners, businesses, the community, a small army of volunteers, led the borough through the pandemic, supporting thousands of shielding residents, giving out millions of pounds worth of support grants to local firms, and helping rough sleepers off the streets. So there were just a few numbers there which are in the borough recovery plan, if you would like to look at them in more detail. But going back to 2019, pre-pandemic, Hounslow had one of the fastest growing economies in London. Unfortunately, COVID did rather slam the brakes on. It highlighted weaknesses in our local economy, an over-reliance on Heathrow, one could argue, firms unable to cope with economic shocks, and an economy where the benefits of growth hadn't been shared as widely as we'd hope. The latest available data was published this morning. On the slide up there, it says 13,000 residents furloughed. As of the end of August, that figure was 11,400, the provisional figures, so still high, still one of the highest take-up rates in the UK nationally, and that's a reflection of our proximity to Heathrow and the number of residents employed there. The furlough scheme did end last month, but there's obviously a lag in the data. Last year we did see sort of unmanageable job losses pre-pandemic at Heathrow and in associated businesses, and a lot of those were concentrated in lower skilled roles, which did hit women and those on low incomes hardest, and also highlight there the disproportionate impact on some of our ethnic minority groups. So that's what we were dealing with. Oh, I need to move the slides on. Okay. So the Council's planning for recovery started all the way back in the spring 2020. 4 recovery task forces were established, community, economic, green and social and wellbeing being the 4th. Those task forces brought together councillors, partners, advisors, and they developed the evidence base for action. By July last year, the Council had convened the Recovery Programme Board, which was chaired by the leader, and again brought together partners, senior figures from Heathrow, health and community, colleagues, schools, Brentford Football Club, the Met Police, major businesses and developers. Then in September, we held the virtual, and I think quite groundbreaking, Borough Recovery Conference, which was participated in by over 200 people, including residents, again, NHS staff, businesses, faith leaders, and through workshops and discussions at that conference, that really shaped a shared vision for the borough's recovery as captured in the plan, which I've got a little picture of up there, which went to Cabinet in October last year. Now, the plan sets out the key interventions the Council and partners will take to recover across 4 foundation responses: renewing local economies, tackling local inequalities, empowering local residents, and reimagining local places. The Council recognised early that our recovery needed to be green and sustainable. So in addition to all the work I just described, running in tandem over a 12-week period, the Council ran a series of innovation labs, iLabs, again, very much in partnership, bringing together academics, business leaders, as well as residents to sort of discover, explore and create a green recovery strategy, which went to Cabinet in January this year, so January 2021. That green recovery strategy really builds on the strong foundations of our climate emergency action plan and a lot of work that was already in train pre-pandemic. Normally it's 3 is the magic number, but it's 4 for these documents. So 4 foundation responses in the recovery plan, 4 key areas in the green recovery strategy: low carbon neighbourhoods, low carbon economy, green growth and 21st century mobility. So across those documents, there's well over 100 commitments, as I said, across those 4 foundation responses, and it's a huge range of activity spanning different geographies and timescales from, I'm sorry the text is so small, but if you wanted to, you could go and look at the recovery plan, it's on our website, but a mass recruitment campaign supporting unemployed and furloughed residents into vaccination site operative roles, and then into entry-level roles in the NHS. Our Keep It Local campaign, we've successfully awarded over 25 million to Hounslow businesses to additional mental health support for young people. again, just reiterating really on this slide the huge breadth of activity and the arrangements we've now put in place to make sure that we're delivering against those commitments that we set out across those documents. So we've established a Recovery Delivery Board, which is chaired by the Council Chief Exec and has input from colleagues from across the Council, as well as partners and experts. Some initial areas of focus over the sort of early part of this year, given some of those figures I mentioned at the beginning, skills and employment is key. Reopening and reimagining our town centres, which Kate will pick up on and specifically reference Hounslow Town Centre. We've also been doing a lot of work with sub-regional, pan-London and national partners, because of course our recovery very much embedded in a wider recovery. And having built that evidence base all the way back in the spring last year, we're still very much using data and insight to shape and inform our interventions going forward and making sure that those interventions are having the impact that we hope. So I will just talk very briefly about some of that skills and employment support. There's sort of three sections there, which I suspect you won't be able to read from this distance, and the words don't say exactly this, but effectively it falls into, we've got information, advice and guidance, signposting residents and support to opportunities, to skills training, then the skills training itself, and we're really targeting that at our growth sectors where we can support residents into good, sustainable jobs in growth sectors. So the creative enterprise zone in the borough, green skills growth area, construction training academy, all areas where we think residents can move into good jobs for the future. And then the last few bullet points there are really around the sort of employer engagement and job brokerage, and how we support our young people into sustainable work and making sure they're getting the right skills at school, at college, and the right advice. So Future Pathways is particularly targeted at our care leavers who are not in education, employment or training. And we've got a careers clusters project, which is connecting secondary schools with the college and employers to make sure that the advice that they're giving is on point. Do you want me to do that? Shall I pass to you?
Sure.
Yeah. Over to Kate.
Good evening, councillors. More small writing for you, sorry, we hadn't realised quite how small the screens would be for you. Just taking over from where Sarah's described, just to give you a bit more detail around one of the projects around our town centres. So the reimagining our town centres was one of our recovery plan projects, and was very much seen as a response as looking at the impact across our town centres, which had been massively hit by COVID and the kind of the underlying issues, which the trends that were appearing nationally pre-pandemic accelerated. So the move to online shopping, away from in-person shopping, and changes in people's expectations of what their town centres delivered. So there was a real push that it was an opportunity for the council to take a really good look at our town centres and use this as a way of using somebody else's strapline, build back better, but to really get a grip with our town centres and to carve a new future for them where businesses would be able to thrive, would evolve, adapt to the new situation and the new normal. So part of that then, you would have been part of that visioning work. We developed up 4 town centre vision documents for our town centres, which set out the unique challenges and unique issues and the unique responses and opportunities that our town centres bring to us as well, and set out a new future for those town centres. And they provide a framework for us for future action, working in partnership with our communities, with our businesses, with our landlords, and different across the whole council, bringing together the ambitions of all the services and across the council to have a viable future. Work currently underway is then with the town centre master plans. So for Hounslow and Brentford, it was seen that there was need for a finer grain detail, given the pipeline, the previous housing development that's been underway over the last 10 years, the approvals already in place and the potential pipeline for housing development in the future. It was seen that this was a really unique opportunity where we could set out a new framework for spatial development in the town centre. So that work is currently underway, and there's been a series of workshops on that. So that's kind of the strategic, I suppose, the kind of scene set of the big picture stuff. And we did, underneath that then, there's been a number of projects being delivered. So it's lovely seeing Tim Healy early in the audience, who I'm meeting for the first time, seeing for the first time in flesh, who was with Hounslow Highways, who were a key partner in our reopening safely, and Sabine obviously there as well, in our reopening safely. And we'll go into a bit more detail on that in a second. But that immediate pandemic reaction, that's now evolving into the use of how we're using our Welcome Back Fund money, and you'll have seen recent press releases calling for communities to asking for ideas about how we can get footfall back on the town centre. So if anybody has more ideas, that opportunity is still around. So do check out our website, or my email is the usual council email, kate.bull@hounslow.gov.uk. There is funding there for community groups and businesses to run activities in their town centres and really bring people back in. So that is there. We have also been looking at unlocking meanwhile uses around the town centres, so working with our private landlords and getting community groups, businesses into different properties. We've been really focusing on the visitor economy and launched the new inhounslow.com website, which is kind of promoting Hounslow and all the hidden gems across the borough and promoting our town centres. Been very much looking at the nighttime economy and how we're going to start working around supporting that in the future, which is a really key issue for Hounslow Town Centre. And we've put together a package of town centre specific business support. So the following slides are just kind of, we had some key pointers from John that you might be really interested in. So in terms of that economic impact on Hansa High Street, we can really see here, Hansa High Street actually was remarkably buoyant during the various lockdowns. Obviously, it did drop below the pre-pandemic, but our thinking was it was very much linked to the banks, the number of banks on the high street, and the local residents' reliance on those banks. So we did see a high footfall, which brought with it its own challenges during the lockdowns, but has allowed the town centre to kind of, I think, bounce back quicker than many of the other outer London town centres, which is fantastic. And it's very much above the UK average and the central London average. What we are seeing on the bottom graph then, again, sorry, the writing's so tiny, but I think your slides will be in your pack, but this is just the spend, the MasterCard spend. So on the left-hand side of the graph, we're going back to February 2020, 2020, and then up to present day, up to August present day. So by August, we're seeing that the retail spend, which is the top line, is actually higher than the February. But just to note, obviously, that was a February spend, so it would have been a low point of the year, but in terms of the normal spending patterns in the year. But there is a bounce back there, which is fantastic. Chiswick is the orange below, and then Feltham, and then Brentford at the bottom there. We have the vacancy rate. We have been also monitoring across the town centres in the borough, and while it is still slightly below normal, we're above the national average, so which is fantastic. I just wanted to touch on the work that was underdone in the reopening safely. And again, as I said, this was very much a partnership approach. We very quickly mobilised a cross-council and key partners such as Hansa Highways task group, which coordinated both physical activity across the town centres, everything practical from helping businesses doing social distancing stickers on pavements to a plethora of different media campaigns using all sorts of different mechanisms, from lamp column wraps, multimedia, leaflets to homes, e-bulletins, you name it, we tried it, and very, very quickly. So it was a huge effort and fantastic piece of partnership working. Lots of the work has been focusing around digitalisation, which has been massively important in terms of getting businesses to have an online offer. And that was a trend, as I said, we were seeing before the pandemic, but accelerated and will continue post. So all this work is continuing in some form in terms of ensuring that our businesses are best supported to adapt to this new normal that we're all finding ourselves in. We've also launched the affordable workspace in Brentford, which is fantastic. Which and is going to act as a pilot, which we're then looking at other spaces around the borough using our assets as part of the corporate asset review about how we could further support our businesses with affordable workspaces. This was just a nod just to remind you of the vision that was coming through from the Town Centre vision document and will be carried forward into the master plan. As I said, that each vision developed for the town centres was a really unique one, so hopefully that it chimes. We did a huge kind of 8-month programme of engagement with communities, with landowners and our business communities, councils, internal services, to really kind of hone down what the future of Hanslow kind of meant to them. And as I said, a number of projects will be taken forward and programmes over the next 5-10 years that will really realise that and activate that. And then the other ask we had from you guys, and I hope that's correct, is the an update on the High Street Quarter, which is obviously we were really pleased and that development was able to continue throughout the pandemic after a short pause, and will really spearhead the regeneration of the High Street and provide a completely new experience for residents as that comes to fruition. So just in terms of, now I'm not a planner, so I've had an update, so bear with me here. So Block D, and there's a phasing bit at the end which will help. So Block D is now fully occupied, completely finished. Block C, which is the one we've all been kind of waiting for, is imminent and should be all finished occupied by November 2021, which is fantastic. And that includes our affordable housing, the L&Q affordable housing, which is fantastic. The tower, Block B, the structure is now complete, as I'm sure you've all seen, and wrapped up, and they're well underway with installing those windows, which is fantastic, and they're looking at occupation during summer 2022. So within 8 months we'll be complete, which is fantastic. Block A is the slower one, but again, they're estimating completion by autumn 2022. As part of this, as I'm sure you're aware, that LBH have purchased 65 homes to rent as part of that, of varying sizes, which obviously responds to the changing needs in our residents, and that we're not going for the 1 to 2 bed flats. So we have a range of family-sized homes there. An update on the commercial units as well, which is really exciting. So we're starting to see the uses coming forward here. You may remember it went through planning committee, I think about 6-7 months ago, where there was a response in terms of the changing markets and the lesser demand for retail. So some of the uses now have been allowed to be for leisure. And I think there's a general understanding now that will actually be fantastic. This new leisure offer will really drive footfall and kind of increase that experiential view of the high street, which now, especially our young people, kind of really expect from our high streets and make us much more competitive to our local areas such as Kingston. So we have Heavenly Desserts, which I don't know if anyone's sampled. I have yet to be there, but I'm more looking forward to the Japanese. But we've got some really exciting, fantastic, healthy leisure experiences in terms of we've got rock climbing and trampolining. So some really interesting stuff coming forward there, and it's going to be great to see that coming alive. This last one is just the phasing, just so you can see where it is. So the top right is the Block C, which is a completion in November 2021, and that is where the rock climbing is going to be. Block D, bottom right, so it's not, I don't think it's quite lined northwest, so I won't do that. Bottom right is the occupied, and that has on the Smithy Lane, which is the cut through down to the high street. That has where the Heavenly Desserts and the Japanese is going to be, and then Cineworld and the cinema fit out, which is going to be on that bottom left side, and the trampolining. So a really exciting addition there. And that's me.
Thank you very much, ladies. That's a fantastic presentation. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Mehriban.
You're saying it's due for completion summer 22, is that right? Most of it?
Yes, there's only, the last bit was autumn 22, I think.
Okay.
Said, but
What
yeah.
sort of month are we looking at?
That's the update we've had from Barrett. So I don't think we haven't had a month. That was the data I got back yesterday from Barrett. So.
But definitely summer.
They seemed really confident. Yeah, really confident. So yeah.
Well, they've done it pretty well so far.
I think they've done fantastically keeping that build going through the pandemic.
Any more questions? Councillor Vikram Gariwal.
Sorry, Chair. I guess it's slightly more of a comment than a question. Being a young boy being raised in Hounds, I used to love going to Snakes and Ladders, for example, as a young boy. So it's great to see rock climbing and trampolining, and if appropriate, or if possible, I'll probably be visiting both of those at the grand age of 32. So it's great to see, and the cinema's great to see. I wish the cinema was near the front, like on the actual high street. From an architectural point of view, I think that would be much better for us in terms of footfall for neighbouring businesses and creating a real buzz in the high street. At the back, I feel like that's slightly neglected, but that's hindsight, and unfortunately, I think it might be too late to change that. So that would be my other comment. But I think it's fantastic. I think the high street needed some regeneration and reinvigoration. I think this is exactly what was required. So it's great work so far.
Chair, Chair, I'll just
sure.
respond. Just on that, I totally agree with the positioning of the cinema, and I think it's been noted in the master plan. We're very much looking. Obviously, we've got Bell Square as our kind of cultural space, and we really want to make sure that stays activated. And I think there is an acknowledgement that the High Street Quarter could draw footfall towards that end of the high street. So kind of maintaining the triangle with Bell Square, Treaty Centre and the Arts Centre Hounslow and the cinema and the new quarter is going to be really important. And how we drive that through the master plan is kind of, we're teasing all that out now. But yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I've got a comment as well. I think I've heard politicians, national politicians, be quite dismissive of town centres and high streets, and I remember a former officer of the council being quite dismissive of high streets in general, not specifically, fortunately, former officer of the council. All of us here, politicians, residents, everyone, and I think nationally really love our high streets and our town centres and feel that they are at the heart of what is important about Britain. What is really great to see from both you and from the work that's going on in Hounslow is that Hounslow is putting its town centres and its high streets at its heart. And I think, from the work that you're doing and the work that's been going on in the High Street Quarter really demonstrates that. So the challenge is, what do our high streets offer? Can we encourage people, and Vikram makes a great point about the cinema. I mean, it is far too late to change where it is, but it's those types of things that we really need to be pushing on. What is it that is going to continue to make our high streets grow? So it's thinking, well, this is great. This is going to be ready. We're saying summer 22, but we need to be thinking about 25 and 27 and 2030. What is it that's going to keep encouraging people to come to the high street, to spend money in the high street, to have a business in the high street, to make money from the high street, and grow the local area, not just in Hounslow, but in Chiswick and Brentford and Feltham, and our other smaller centres as well. So, this is a good demonstration of what is happening in Hounslow, but I would, say that the work and that sort of, horizon scanning, to use an annoying management phrase, needs to continue. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions? Councillor Malik.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Considering the premises generally downstairs, obviously there are food, mostly restaurants, I think. What concerns me, it is the night economy brings in nightmares with it. And that is antisocial behavior and stuff like this. I'm sure the police is going to be around and all the rest of it. But is there anything which is actually built in within that housing and cinemas and all the rest of it, where it doesn't disturb people and they come back again and again and they enjoy the town centre? That's a little bit of a concern, probably, a bit too soon, but it is back of my mind.
I think that's a concern for everybody. As you say, the nighttime economy in Hounslow is a challenge. I think, and our chief inspector would agree. We have managed to secure a little bit of money from the GLA to do what we're going to do is it's broadly going to be a cultural and leisure mini spatial strategy, but the crux of the output of it will be a new lighting strategy for Hansa High Street, and part of that is kind of twofold, very much community safety based. We've had so much feedback about the different alleyways and lanes, and some of those aren't council and some of them are unadopted, so there's all sorts of trickiness about who owns what and where we can work. But some of this needs to be addressed before the cinema opens, and I think we don't want to be, as you say, ruining that first experience. Somebody comes the first time and then never come back again. We want that repeat business. We need that repeat business. We want to make that beautiful experience for everybody. But there's also a challenge with the existing high street. So that lighting strategy hopefully will also be an atmospheric, so it won't be kind of utility. We're not thinking about utility spotlights, be adding value to the nighttime economy in terms of making the high street a pleasanter place to be. So it won't be immediate, and we don't have the funding yet to implement the lighting strategy, but next challenge, small steps.
Tiny question, Chair, if I may. Is Cine World still in there? And when are we opening the cinemas?
The cinema, we were told, has signed its lease and is due to be outfitting very shortly. So the structure is complete. It's just the outfitting.
I was told it's the Easter, just before Easter, yeah.
Councillor Vikram Grewal.
Thank you, Chair. More of a question. If we could flick over to the slide with the MasterCard data, I think it's quite insightful. If we look at the 2021 numbers on the first column, it's great to see that we're just below the UK average, but well above the Greater London one. Then it dips. 2021 on year to date on year, there's a bit of a difference there, but why do we think that it significantly dropped compared to the Greater London average, and what can we do to improve it? I appreciate this is just MasterCard spending data on there, so it's dropped to 17.1 compared to, it's about 5% below the UK average, which is a real shame, and our week on week in 2020 and 2021, well, 2020 is terrible. 2021 is quite low as well. Look, I mean, I personally don't use a MasterCard, so I know this is very much indicative, but hopefully we can just try and take pictures out of this. And I think one way to boost the local economy, lighting, I had a huge smile on my face when you said it, because we badly need that in the high street. I mean, I wouldn't walk in some parts of the high street in the evening. I don't see it. There is no purpose of it at night, because you have some takeaway shops, betting shops, which I absolutely despise, and there's too many of them in the high street. That's one for our licensing committee, I know, but we need to make a conscious effort to change the shops in our high street, to change the actual area itself, and some of it is coming clearly. But what can we do to address this? Not just so individuals like me just come to Santander in the high street because the Hounslow West one is shut now. We need to try and do something else, and then hopefully that feeds through on the data as well. So have we thought about that, change the complexion of the stores and the high street?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very tricky one, because obviously the market takes slightly. So where we've, the high streets where we've got land ownership, it's easier to implement some of that. Unfortunately, we don't own any of the commercial units along the high street. So while we can talk to landlords, it is a tricky one. And there's currently, although we will obviously keep kind of looking out for it and applying wherever possible, there's no shop fronts money, which kind of 5 years ago there was a lot of shop fronts money flying around, so you could kind of look at the kind of overall look and feel of your high street. So I think there's ambitions definitely in that direction. It's a very tricky one for the council to unlock, because it's not kind of in our gift, apart from the licensing issue, which is definitely something we can look at and is aware. And again, the master plan touches on some of that, about kind of tightening up about that, that the betting shops and etc. But yeah, the kind of the turnover Hansa High Street's tricky. It doesn't have a high vacancy rate, but it has quite a high, or traditionally did have a high turnover rate, and not very good quality shops coming through very quickly. So kind of slowing that churn and getting a better quality of shop, embedding. And I think the High Street quarter will really lead some of that in terms of if that brings a higher footfall and a kind of a big visitor economy with kind of pulling from a wider area, then the shops will follow. So it's a bit of a wait and see. As the council, kind of all we can do is the bits in our gift, which is the kind of public realm, the cleanliness, the waste collection, the kind of the bits that we can control. And I think there's discussions underway about making, as always, about the standards and kind of improving wherever we can. So it's.
Thank you. Councillor Meherban.
I just want to touch on what Councillor Gariwal said about the shops. This is all really fantastic work, and I'm looking forward to some of that as well. But when we're looking at people going out for shopping, and I mean, stuff like clothes and, etc., really on our high street, you could really just count something like Next and H&M. Apart from that, we don't have anything. Now, obviously, I'm not alone in this. Everyone else would agree that if you want to buy anything decent, you have to go, you go to Staines or Ealing or Uxbridge or Kingston or wherever. But we're losing those customers. So obviously, the council needs to do whatever it can to try and keep those people in Hounslow and spend their money there rather than going somewhere else. So I think a lot more needs to be done. Obviously, it's a debate that you have with, people like M&S or whatever, but I think it is a big conversation to be had.
Very true. Okay, what I'm going to do is open the floor for questions. If anyone from the public would like to ask any questions, now's your opportunity. Yep, just wait for the mic.
Good evening, I'm David Thurman from the Hounslow MS Group. One concern I have got as a mobility scooter user, this goes throughout the whole of the borough, is access for people in wheelchairs, mobility scooters. Hounslow West has a big impact. I don't go up there because a lot of the shops have stuff out on the public footpath, so you're forced to go on to the road, which is not safe. Are you making a lot of these buildings disabled friendly that you can get in? Because a lot of the shops in town aren't wide enough for wheelchair users, mobility scooters. It's something that everybody feels in our community, that the council need to make these accessible for not just people that have got legs at work, but obviously for people in wheelchairs.
Thank you. Some really good points there. And I'll let our highways team take the Hanslow West question. I think the new units, and I'm not a planner, so excuse me, but my understanding is with all the new builds in terms of the High Street quarter, everything nowadays, there is minimum building regulations, and we are very good at making sure that those building regulations will, be carried through. So I think that's all fine. The issue is always that retrofitting with historic buildings which weren't, were built a number of years, and also then the outfitting of the shops once the tenant gets in them and how much they cram into their shops, and then moving around inside is then, it's a very tricky one. So I think with that, I know Celia from our side, you should probably know Celia Golden, is very good at kind of raising awareness with us, and wherever possible we will try and talk to a particular shop if they're making their stock in, the inside layout very difficult, but the physical kind of doorways of the older buildings, it is just unfortunately it's not in our gift to kind of enforce them to change that. But the new buildings, touch wood, should all be completely disabled access, so hopefully you will enjoy your experience in the new High Street quarter, but we'll wait to hear.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? Your town centres, your opportunity. Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Sarah and Kate. Thank you for the presentation and for your time. Thank you. And with that, we move on to the next item, which is Hounslow Highways. Tim Hurley, I understand, is here. Last item. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Thank you, Shabil and Tim. Over to you.
It's a pleasure, and it's actually it's strange, I guess, to be with everyone again. And Kate, I must have had, I don't know, 3-4 dozen meetings online. It's the first time I've actually seen her in person. So, thank you for inviting us along today. I understand this is specifically about street cleansing, so there is an awful lot that Hounslow Highways have been doing over the last 2 years, because I think it's September 2019 I was last here. But I'm going to keep it on street cleansing. I've got some fairly simple slides. I do have some more detailed ones afterwards, or something that may come up. But then, yeah, open up to questions if that's okay.
Thank you.
Remember to do this. My lovely assistant here will operate the teleprompt. So I don't really want to dwell on COVID, but I guess it's interesting actually just listening tonight on the amount of things that have been going on over the last 2 years and how it's affected our service and the people of Hounslow. For us, we take great pride that through COVID we had uninterrupted service. It doesn't mean that we didn't have to make an awful lot of adjustments, but we had a workforce who wanted to work. And actually there were other benefits from staff that may have been furloughed from other businesses in the Hounslow area actually came to work for us during the COVID situation. But there was great pride from the people that work for Hounslow Highways in being able to work, in the partnership that we have with the council in supporting us as key workers, and actually from members of the public. So I guess it's a bit of a thank you really, because they did get a lot of appreciation from members of the public who were admittedly stuck at home when they were out, but they were putting themselves, especially in the beginning when we were trying to understand everything, in what could have been a dangerous situation. But during that, as well as maintaining the service, which included for us, I guess, adjustments within our facility at Bridge Road, one-way systems, building new welfare, cleaning of vehicles, face masks, social distancing rules, bubbles, everything that everybody had to go through, including kicking out probably most of the back office staff from the building so that operations could continue. We also supported the borough, so as Kate said, social distancing measures in the town centres, including getting on our hands and knees and putting distancing stickers on the floor outside the banks in Hounslow High Street, and discussing skid ratings on stickers because you had to have a certain resistance on the sticker for someone not to slip on it. So a lot of things came out of everything that we had to do. Including the mobile testing units that the borough put in place, so the one at Bell Road car park from May 20 to September 21, 3 additional semi-permanent sites, and supporting the council's other facilities, so providing things like toilets for Lambton 360 and Hounslow Highway staff, because the places that normally would have gone during COVID were all closed to them. So again, just a lot of adjustments, barriers, signage, providing gritting during that situation, and also the conflict, I guess, from wanting to encourage businesses to be open by allowing them to come out onto the high street without causing restrictions to other members and users of prams, wheelchairs, etc. There was also the Spaceway traffic management. So Spaceway opened around May 2020, and we spent around 6 months, I think, providing a 7-day-a-week support to ensure that responsible people that wanted to dispose of their waste were stuck at home and were essentially consuming more and doing clear-outs, were able to dispose of that responsibly at Spaceway. So that's just a bit of context about COVID, but other than that, through the year, we've had our usual things. So we have our 18 main routes and town centre operatives working away. as well as the usual bin emptying crews and 2 weekly wall-based cleansing. But the de-cleanse program had to continue. That's been an essential effort for us because it allows us to get the obstructions out of the way. But because of COVID, we had to consider how we did that. So normally we would suspend the road and remove all the parking. But recognizing that a lot of people were staying in at home or working from home, we changed that. So we were only closing one side of the road at a time. And that appears to have been successful and is actually being continued. We also had things like the lethal program, weed removal program, and the challenges and opportunities that come from Brentford Football Club. So we've recruited additional operatives for weeding and lethal, but also for Brentford specifically, and the changing hours that we had to accommodate through 20,000 additional people working through the borough, and a lot of pre-planning and negotiations with the council departments, but also with Transport for London, because essentially it's bringing 20,000 additional people into an area where there is 1 train station, 2 tube stations, and an active discouragement of driving for supporters, so encouraging most of those supporters to take public transport. In addition to that, we've seen the build of additional cycleway facilities, and potentially CS9, I think, coming through to the borough. And that's been a challenge for us about how we maintain the highway and how we clean it, because whereas normally we would have sent a large, heavy mechanical sweeper, we now have to go into those cycleways at 5 o'clock in the morning with a small sweeper and additional men. So it's just, I guess, adjusting to the challenges that we've had this last year, which is recognizing those challenges will come from good things, from additional investment into the borough, from changes in the way people travel, healthier and more environmentally friendly ways of traveling as well. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. So before we carry on, I think it's important to note Hanslow Highways throughout the pandemic, Recycle 360 throughout the pandemic, and Green Space 360 throughout the pandemic carried on their duties as normal. That was to allow our town centres to be available, to be clean, domestic waste to be collected as normal, and our parks and open spaces, especially that when we were allowed only out for, was it 1 hour a day, I think it was, people did frequent our parks more often. And so it was really, really important that our parks remain safe as well. So our 3 main providers from an environmental services point of view did a fantastic job of making sure that the borough was available for all of our residents.
So I guess that's where we've been, I guess, talking about the upcoming challenges. I think one that's probably most visible for a lot of people is the condition of the street from when they leave their house to going to the high street. That generally for us is littering, additional problems such as lethal, weeding, but fly tipping. So we have here some slides of fly tipping. To get some context, the graph in the top left-hand corner shows in orange the number of inquiries we're getting in other service areas. So orange is things like crossovers, highways, planning application requests that will come through to us. And you can see in 2013, the orange was the largest portion of activities or inquiries that came through our website. If you move along the graph to 2020, you see that the blue, which is fly tipping, essentially now outstrips everything else that we get. So we now receive well over 39,000 inquiries a year for our website. I think the first year we probably had around 22,000, something like that. But fly tipping is probably our most reported item. It doesn't necessarily mean that fly tipping is getting worse. It could, in essence, mean that reporting of fly tipping is getting better. And also the targets we have to remove fly tipping of 24 hours are so good that it's almost worth putting the waste out on the street, reporting it, and having someone collect it for you. But it is an ongoing challenge for us because the more fly tips we have to clear, it's a drain on our resource that could be spending their good time doing other things in the borough. Just to give some local context, the graph on the bottom right-hand corner, we've highlighted there the 4 areas of central Hounslow, Hounslow South, Hounslow Heath, and Hounslow West. So you have probably a far higher reported number of fly tips than any of the other wards. In fact, those 4 wards account for 40% of all fly tips reported. Now, this is something that we're working hard to address with the client teams in the council, especially the enforcement and the special waste service team, to essentially change behaviours through enforcement and education. Both of those are essential because I think it's fair to say a lot of fly tipping isn't intentional. It's probably through a lack of awareness about the correct route to dispose of their waste. Don't know if you wanted to mention anything about that, Seville?
I'll talk specifically about the Special Waste Service and a couple of the other programs that Environment are doing, so I'll let Tim finish off first.
Thank you. Upcoming challenges. Next slide, please. There is the business as usual, which is everything I put on the slides before this, but we have to continually improve and adapt to the opportunities and challenges that are coming forward. Specifically for cleansing, we've got 3 large amenity area sites that we're clearing actually this month and going through to the end of this year. One is just off Kingswood Avenue on the Great West Road, which we're essentially removing large amounts of unwanted vegetation, fly tips and littering, which will help lift that area and create a sense of pride. We have 2 more, one in the Sign Ward and one just off North Hyde Lane, which aren't small efforts. They are weeks' worth of work to essentially open up what are nice green spaces so that the areas that can be used and utilised by the local residents of Hounslow by making them open but also free of litter and fly tips. Weeding is probably the biggest challenge we've seen this last year. I do have some slides on this, which if you'll indulge me, I'll go into. But I think we can all say that we've seen more weeds on the roads this last year. There are various reasons for that, which I'll go into shortly after. But some of those reasons are seasonal variations. We have benefited during lockdown from very long and comfortable weather. The right amount of rain, good amounts of sunshine has actually exacerbated some of the other issues that we have, including early dropping of leaf fall, but also excessive weed growth. So we're working towards how we challenge or how we deal with them because of them are related to changes in law. Also, there's the environmental impact reduction we're looking into. So ULEZ is coming to the borough on the 21st of October, so it goes up to the A406. For us, we've had to essentially invest in half of our fleet in more environmentally friendly fleets. So electric vehicles, for example, all of our supervisor vans this year went electric. And also we have the first 7.2 tonne electric cage tipper in the country, actually, which was specifically built for Hounslow by our parent company, Ringway, at a cost of over £160,000, which is around 3 times the price of a normal vehicle. But we accept these are things we have to do to understand what is out there or what we can work with partner companies on to build so that we have a fleet that is environmentally friendly going forward. We've had to accommodate that with long-term planning, so we put 16 additional electric vehicle charging points in our depot so that when we have the electric vehicles, we also have the means to power them. And then the other thing, I guess, is behavioural change. So the graphs I brought up on fly tipping earlier, the only way we'll ever address that is by reducing the number of fly tips that come through and getting a greater sense of pride. Now, I think over the last 2 years and before, one of the great boons for us and our workforce has been the amount of volunteering that's been taking place all across the borough. It's almost a problem now getting in the amount of bags and gloves and litter pickers because there's such a demand from residents to take part and help keep their area clean. I just wanted to say that because it is greatly appreciated, not just because I guess it helps make our job easier, but it shows for our operatives that what they're doing is valued by the community and also supported by them in their own way. Just next slide. Weed growth has been the biggest issue this year, so I'm going to come through these slides pretty quickly. But essentially there is a changing law with the banning of glyphosate in public areas, and Hanslow has been very forward-thinking in reducing or stopping the use of glyphosate. It's only used in very specific examples now. So being the right thing to do environmentally, it's also created the question about how we control weeds going forward. So for 2 years now, we've not been using glyphosate. And it's fair to say that with the seasonal weather, that's resulted in an increase in weed. So we've had to adapt by bringing our weed growth program forward. Normally it would have started in around June, but we brought it forward to April. We've also brought in an additional 18 operatives because the only solution is to manually remove them. And the only way of doing that is having more people on the ground. The impact of not being able to spray the weeds has also meant that they're seeding more. So we are working with partner organisations and other boroughs to see what else is out there and what else has been done. We're bringing in additional fleets, which have mechanical weed rippers on, to help get the weeds out quicker. And I guess we're just using this as a learning curve so that when we go into next year, we're better capable of giving the residents what they deserve. I don't think weeds are the biggest issue for a lot of people, but visually they're there. And I guess if there's a lot of weeds on the network, people may feel that their network isn't being cared for or maintained. So it is a challenge for us that we're working through. And just to be honest on the statistics there, if you can go to the next graph. This graph shows the number of weeding complaints that we've had in the last 8 years. And you can see the last 2 years has seen a consequent increase in complaints around weeding. So we have to recognize that and understand that although we know we're doing the right thing, it's not giving the residents necessarily the outcome that they deserve, which is why we have to work on other options. Next slide. And this is just a brief breakdown of weeding inquiries year on year. Essentially, the items or the wards in red are the ones where there's been a significant increase in weeding complaints. Green is actually a reduction, and yellow is a small increase. So we're using a lot of statistical information to understand where the problems are. Because resource is finite, we have to direct that resource to the right place. The only way of doing that is understanding where the issues are now, so that when we go into next year, we're hitting those areas quicker and harder with more resource. Just very briefly, what is the resource we've got on weeding? We have dedicated decleanse teams that are putting park in suspensions to allow mechanical sweeping to take place, to remove detritus and take weeds out. We have what we call strike teams, which are equipped with streamers and vehicles to target areas which are deemed to be problem hotspots. We also have additional resource put in with our 2 weekly ward-based teams. That's additional 16 operatives. And we have additional reactive teams, which again are going to areas before they become a huge problem. So they recognise through our own inspections that they can't wait for the 2-week program or for the decleanse to come through. We need to get to them sooner. We've also trialled different equipment this year. So equivalents to glyphosate is foam stream, is one that we've used to see if we could maybe identify the top 20 roads, 30 roads in each borough, in each year, and treat those with a different solution. And as I've said, we're looking at weed rippers and mechanical solutions. The other thing is working with partner boroughs and authorities. Hounslow has gone ahead with the decision to remove the use of glyphosate, and other boroughs in West London are going to have that same challenge. We've just had the challenge earlier. By sharing our knowledge and the knowledge of Hammersmith, Ealing, various other boroughs and specialists, we can work on a solution going forward. Part of that will be identifying roads that could do with early carriageway or footway treatment to actually increase the condition of the asset by filling in gaps where weeds grow from. So far this year, we have, through this specific additional resource, so not our normal resource, additional 18 operatives brought in, we have attended 1,028 roads specifically for weeding treatment. Of those 1,028 roads, 165 roads have been visited more than once, and actually 36 of those have been visited more than twice. So this is part of the statistical information about understanding where the problem is, so that next year we can work on that earlier rather than wait for residents to tell us where we need to be going. And just in terms of context, one road to de-weed takes around 2 men a day to do. That's important for us in understanding the resource. So where do we send a resource depends upon how much resource we have. Next steps, I think I've already run through a lot of these. So targeted roads on the programme for early deployment next year. Some of the graphs that I've shown you earlier. A seminar led by Hanslow Council, working with neighbouring authorities to look at future solutions. Identifying roads for treatment to address channel weeds, so essentially asphalting the first foot of the area between the curb and the carriageway to fill in particular areas where there are patches and gaps. I can't even read my own writing now, so apologies. Starting the programme earlier, so starting in April 22 next year, And the other big thing for us is using that volunteer resource. A lot of residents have actually expressed an interest and already do remove weeds from outside of their property or in their road. We would like to utilise that activity next year and encourage residents to help be part of the solution in terms of removing weeds and creating that sense of pride that goes with it. We'll also be looking at other options for tree pits, where you do get a prolific amount of reeds. If we can encourage residents to plant within some of the tree pits, not only will it make the street look prettier, it will make it easier to maintain. I think that was that. Thank you.
Chair, if you don't mind, if I can have a couple of minutes just to add some things from the authority side of things as well.
Sure.
Because it was really interesting what Tim described, and I didn't know that Sarah was coming in today. So it's nice that, because a lot of the work that Hounslow Highways have done are linked to the recovery plans, in particular the green recovery plan. You know, Tim talked about the decision that the borough made 2 years ago to stop using chemicals, which is bad for the environment, bad for biodiversity in the borough as well, because that is another part of our recovery in terms of green recovery as well, to encourage that biodiversity we have in the borough. We made that bold decision to stop using chemicals. Our neighbours, Ealing and Hillingdon, are still using chemicals. Unfortunately, that doesn't kill the weeds. So removing by hand doesn't kill weeds. Like Tim said, there were 65 roads we went twice, and 32 we went 3 times. And these roads, like I said, you know, one road takes two operatives a full day. Mr. Gardner spoke earlier on about police numbers. We don't have operatives on the street 24 hours a day on every single street. So we have to be really, really careful and methodical of how we deploy that resource. It is a problem, and we've acknowledged it's a problem, that weeds are pretty much everywhere. Like Tim said, it's been a perfect storm in terms of the weather, added to the fact that we're not killing them at the root. So this is our second year of doing it. We are learning as we go along. Like Tim said, we are holding a seminar with our neighbours, with some other authorities as well, with some providers of a different solution, a non-chemical solution, to see if there's something that we can use. A couple of things that Tim also talked about, again, linked to the green recovery that Sarah talked about earlier on. The electrification of vehicles and equipment that will go towards our carbon reduction. We're greening the borough, we're planting more trees, we're planting more shrubs. We're hoping to plant a new tree for each baby born in the borough this year. Last year was about 5,000, so there's going to be 5,000 new trees in the borough. I've spoken to a couple of you about this as well. We're going to be planting 1 real Christmas tree per ward in the next month as well. And again, that will be effectively a gift to the residents to say, you know, these are Christmas trees for you. If you want to decorate them, if you want to put baubles on them, tinsel on them, whatever you want. And it's not just for Christmas; it's for any festive occasion as well. You know, we're promoting electrical vehicles, so we're installing, you know, hundreds of electrical vehicle charging points, as Tim talked about earlier on. The borough, working with external organisations, we are increasing the number of safe cycle lanes as well, to get people on their bikes and to get people out and about. I talked about, you know, the operatives working for the last 18 months non-stop, trying to make that borough a little bit better for everybody. The first thing that Tim talked about was fly tipping, which is it's been a massive problem for the whole country for about 10, 15 years now. It's not a new phenomenon now. What Tim talked about earlier on in terms of reporting, more reporting is great because that gives us the data about where these incidents are happening. The borough made a decision to say, okay, we have an enforcement team and we're not going to distract them from their work. They've got statutory work on noise, on odour from Mogden and private land. What we were lacking is a dedicated task force specifically to enforce against fly tipping. And the fly tipping in those legacy hotspot areas that have been problems for over a decade. So we established a team called the Special Waste Service, SWS for short, and we told them, go to Hounslow East and sort the problems out there. So a lot of the councillors here and some of the residents may know, Hounslow East was fly tipping everywhere, on every single corner, every single little nook and cranny of that area, Kingsley Road and all the roads off it as well. My team has effectively been there non-stop every single day for 6 months. I don't know whether people have gone to Kingsley Road recently. There's been a marketable improvement. They've issued, in total, so they're not just working in Hounslow East, and I'll come to the other areas as well. The team was established at the end of March. By the end of September, which was only last week, they've issued 534 FPNs. They've written to 2,000 properties across the borough in terms of reminding them their responsibilities of disposing of their domestic waste correctly, using the council facilities. We have obviously domestic waste bins. You can get a bigger bin if a 140 litre isn't big enough. Everyone has recycling facilities for their plastics, paper and glass and so and so. We have Spaceway just down the road. It's only a 10-minute drive, actually, to be honest. Use that as many times as you want as a resident to get rid of your domestic waste. We also have introduced a bulky waste collection as well. So instead of paying 20 quid or 40 quid for curries when you buy a new fridge, tell the council we can pick it up. So there are loads of things that we do, but the residents just don't get it, unfortunately, sometimes. And that's where the enforcement comes in. And by having a dedicated enforcement team on site every day for the last 6 months, we've made a real improvement in Hounslow East. The team are now moving away, not away completely from Hounslow East, because the methodology is we are there because that is the #1 hotspot in the borough. But we're now moving into Hounslow Heath, Hounslow South, and bits of Hounslow West as well. There was just a couple of other things I wanted to talk about, if you don't mind. I'll be very quick, Chair. Kate talked about some nooks and crannies around the high street that we're not quite sure of who owns it, who maintains it. The lighting is terrible as well. There is a cross-cutting project across the council involving my team, highways, parks, housing, corporate property, that's looking after, we're calling it the unmanaged land projects. At the moment, there's about 400 little bits of locations, either tiny little corners or actually full streets, that aren't being maintained by any council service. They may or may not be owned by the council, but at the moment they're not highway, they're not park, they're not housing. So that's a cross-cutting project that we're all working on together as well. That's currently in discovery phase, so we're hoping probably by spring, summer next year, we will be in a position to effectively present to area forums and to borough council as well what we tend to do. Just a point on lighting, again, Mr. Gardner mentioned it earlier on as well. 15,699 lights were converted to LED from 2013 to 2018. We've done a reconciliation of the highways register. We found about 300. They're going to be done by the end of February. So effectively, all of the lights on the public highway in the London Borough of Hounslow will be LED. Just an answer for the gentleman over there about Hounslow West. Apologies, I can't remember your name. We do know this is the area in between where the old Santander was, between Rosemary and Manor Avenue. A licensing officer was there yesterday, speaking to all of the businesses to make sure that they bring in their goods to their licensable area. And from Hounslow Highways' point of view, we're sending a highways inspector there to make sure that there are no obstructions. Being DDA compliant is our #1 priority for the highway. I've taken up too much of my time, so thank you, Chair, for indulging me.
No, that's okay. It's very informative. Thank you so very much. First of all, I want to say thank you for the presentation. Secondly, I want to thank you on behalf of the borough's residents, first of all. During lockdown, I think you guys have done a fantastic job carrying on. Can you imagine if you didn't collect the refuge and what would have happened in lockdown? But thank you. I know you're working really hard, and it is really trying to educate the residents, isn't it, about fly tips and that. And yes, I do agree that Hounslow East is dramatically changed. The fly tips, you're very proactive there. All the little hotspots are diminishing now. So thank you very much for that. Now, open to questions. Okay, Councillor Gariwal first. Pritham Gariwal.
Thank you. Yes, carry on from there. Kingsley Road, Shabil and Tim. Excellent job there now for the last few months. I think it's very well done. Your teams come very early in the morning. I've seen them opening the bags, and obviously you told me how many fines have been done. But it's much better now. It has been. That's a compliment as well. But going back to weed, we have a serious problem. I know you're trying, but I think we need more manpower there now. Like you said, we cannot take the weed out of root. So what they're doing is they're cutting it down. Couple of weeks later, it's growing again. And I'm sorry, I don't agree. Some of the roads in Hounslow Central has not been touched. And the weed is growing 2, 3, 4 feet high. And I can show you some pictures there. So I know we had a problem. We didn't expect this happen this year. But we should learn a lesson from this. And hopefully next year, we should improve it. And that's the most complaints I'm getting at the moment from Hounslow Central Board. So please look into that and learn a lesson and hopefully improve it next year.
Yeah, because where we've cleared up the fly tips, I think now it's looking dreadful with the weed. Are you
Sorry, supplement there. Like Mr. Samra said, when you said we're collecting fridges and things, there was a shout coming, is it free? I think it's free for elderly. It used to be one collection a year. Is it still there or not?
I'll have to double check that, Councillor. I'll do that tonight and then I'll let you know, guys, tomorrow.
Okay, they'll answer. They'll answer. Okay, next on my list, Councillor Mehriban.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say well done for all the hard work that you've all done. And you know what? I'm forever praising Hansa Highways because I think even through the troubled times that we've had, actually, the roads have been cleaned. Whenever I put casework in for rubbish, and I regularly, every other day I put something in, it's always picked up within 24 hours. The parks are clean, neat, and really feel, a really good and safe place to be.
Don't praise them too much; they'll stop working hard.
But no. I mean, no credit where it's due. We should. So well done, first of all, for all the hard work that you have done. And like you said, all the other bits that you said as well. It's all been done, and we have noticed it. So well done. However. Right, I put casework in for weeding, not just in Hansa South, but also where I live in Heston Central. Now, it really amazes me because I'm a keen gardener myself, so I know all about weeds. You come along, and and this is after many times of saying it's not done, it's not done, and there's quite a bit of casework that you just don't tend to get to or reply. That could be improved. But as far as the weeds are concerned, you come along, and I'm talking about quite near to where I live. You come along and you remove a few, and then you say to me, okay, we've done it. And I go out the next day and hang on a minute, it's just a little patch that you've done. The rest of the road is just a little road that comes like that. It's not done. So, and you just touch just the middle part and forget about the bits on the side. So, when a job is done, it should be done thoroughly. I've also asked for cleaning of the roads. Now, when you come to clean, you only clean the little patch that I mentioned, and the rest is still dirty. So, and how often do your litter pickers come? Because where I live, I've not seen them for ages. So, I've said that you do a lot of good work and well done, but things like that still need to be, you need to be on top of your game because this is part and parcel of Hansa Highways, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
It's difficult, I guess. I know personally all of the officers that work for me, so I have a sense of their work ethic, and I take great pride in the people that work for us, and they do. There are challenges in cleaning the borough, and I think resource is probably the biggest challenge because, first of all, it's not like a lot of other things where you can resurface the road and the road's good for a number of years. You can clean the road, and then within a day, 2 days, it could be littering, it could be spillage, it can happen. Parked cars can be an issue. If there is a job that is reported, the crews will generally go to a very specific location and clear it through. This is why we have the decleanse program. This is why we have ward-based, because we need a planned cleansing regime where their job is to go to that road on a planned basis, remove the cars, get all the obstructions out of the way and sweep the road quickly and efficiently. Where it is either something that is like weeding very, very difficult, very labour-intensive to clear, it is a question of how long you keep the resource on that road. So the lessons we've been going through this year is what can we do? On most things we say, how can I reduce weed control? I can't control the weather, which I think is a big part of it, and I don't think we can go back to using glyphosate again. I think we have to accept that this is a challenge we're working through, but we need to be creative. Because a lot of the times you can put your hands up and say, well, they're just going to keep growing back, right? So every time I do it, they'll come. We have to be creative. We have to look at new solutions. Part of that is treating the road. Treating the gaps where the weeds come from. It could be the footway, it could be the carriageway. If we can treat the worst roads in the next year, then that's 20 more, 30 more roads that we don't have to go to with more weeding resource. If we can find another 20, 30 roads where the foam stream solution, which it's a very cumbersome piece of equipment, but it can work, then that's again like our 60 worst roads out. And then it's freeing up the rest of the resource to actually have enough time to do that job properly. I will say that not all operatives are perfect, just like in any profession. So there is also the other challenge for me is bringing the grade, the quality of cleansing up to the highest level that I possibly can. And part of that is a training and education piece. We did benefit through furlough from recruiting a lot of temporary people, taking the best of those and trying to retain them. But actually under the current environment, the challenge is now competing with local businesses for HGV drivers, standard drivers, and actually also just basic operatives, who thankfully are now finding that their old jobs are back open and going back to those in logistics or over to Heathrow. So we are doing our best to retain people without competing possibly financially with some of those companies, so motivating them to want to stay in the borough. We do accept the criticism. We're not saying it's perfect by any means, but we do take it very seriously and we take great pride in what we're doing. And I hope over the next year we can make next year not perfect, but a lot better than this year.
If I may, Chair, can I
very
just
quickly.
tiny. Right. I mean, I know you may not be interested in the Great West Road, but that's where I live. Now, I have put in as casework, I think about 20 times, that on the main road there is a big ditch, a square ditch. Now, it should have a cover on it, so if anyone walks over it or a bike goes over it, someone shouldn't fall in there. Now, that wherever cover it is, it's gone for years on end, and I've kept on putting it in. All you come round and do is put one of your, the triangles, you shove that on top, and that's it, it's gone. But you need to do something, because it's a safety issue.
Okay,
now,
so
one of the neighbours actually caught her foot in there and hurt herself quite badly. So
for that one,
please don't ignore
Councillor
them.
Mehriban, but for individual ones, send Tim an email for that particular site. You raise casework, but if you send it to Tim, maybe.
Councillor, if you can send that to me, that's probably a TfL issue, but if you send it to me, we'll get it to the right place.
Okay. Councillor Sumra.
Thank you very much, at last. I want to raise the question the gentleman raised about the wheelchairs. Because what happened, I don't know why council gave them a license. They know that road is, the footpath is very narrow. And because you make money, and they give them license, and people, disabled, ladies with prams, old people, they can hardly walk, especially in Hanslow West. I'm councillor there. Unfortunately, nobody listen. Because they don't live in Hanslow. You've given them only 2 minutes to the disabled people. Nobody talk about it. We should be talking, they must give them more priority than a normal person. Thank you very much.
I'll take that back to the licensing team, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Very quickly, you'll be pleased to hear. A few years ago, a Danish friend of mine told me that in Denmark they use heat wands to deal with the weeds. Is that something you've looked into, or is it not feasible?
Believe me, I'm looking into everything for weeds, including prayer. We are looking at, there are various tools for electrification and heat. The question is whether it will kill the weed. So at the moment, I discourage the use of strimmers because hand pulling, which is the general preferred method, at least when you pull the root, you do reduce the chance. I think the problem that we've learned from this year is the seeding rate. So it's finding a solution to get out early enough so when there's 3 weeds, you get those 3 weeds are out rather than those 3 weeds become 20 weeds. But we are looking at that option as well.
Thank you. Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you, particularly, I'm sure we all saying thank you to you for Hounslow Central, particularly Kingsley Road, and a couple of others, hotspot, which has actually been resolved. Thank you so much for that. But if I ask a question to make things even better, if there were 2 things you would like to do, what would that be?
Your wish list.
How open is this topic?
Resources doesn't include in this list.
Okay, so are we talking in terms of general cleanliness or weeding?
I'm talking about generally about the state of the borough. I'm talking about generally the state of the borough, the cleaning standard, and actually a good experience for the public. That's generally I'm talking about, not particularly the weeding.
The first thing for me is engagement with residents. The volunteering program we've seen in the last few years has been, it's been a boon to me because I speak to a lot of the residents associations and I'll go out with them, and seeing residents who take pride in where they live and wanting to get involved, spend their own time. And some of these residents are spending 3-4 times a week out there. I would have more of that because for me it's about most of the problems other than weeds and leaf fall, which is actually going to get worse because he keeps planting more trees, are actually related to residents or passes through the borough. So if we can work more with those people and increase the sense of pride, which is there for 95% of people, then that for me is a major solution. The second thing, electrification is an opportunity and a challenge because it's very costly at the moment. So it's very brave for an organisation to make that investment decision. The Hounslow Council actually are benefiting from their decision with the PFI because we're here for another 17 years. We invest on that period. We're not just here for 2 or 3 years. So I think it's the opportunities that are coming with new fleet, mechanisation, and the electrification of that fleet. And some of the electrification we've seen with just blowers and chainsaws have actually improved how we work and made us more efficient. So I'd like to see more investment there. A glyphosate type solution that isn't glyphosate.
Thank you.
Just a small one. What about, how do you feel about some of the residents? Do you think, I don't know, more information to the public, how they should dispose their rubbish, how civic duties, things which actually can make people realize that your action can have a consequences to the others, your neighbors, pedestrians, and all the rest of it, as a part of information pack to, I don't know, maybe I think the most I've seen is a landlord who are actually renting out properties. They're not really been given or given the proper knowledge about placing their rubbish and stuff like that, and just been dumping. So, I mean, I don't know how you feel about that at all.
Fully supportive, and like I say, the volunteer groups often just comes from 1 or 2 people who then engage with their neighbours, so you create a sense of community. So definitely more education, definitely more participation. I think the council, through the Environmental Champions campaign, is doing an awful lot there by actually going out and creating a project with funding and objectives around it, so that other environmental champions can speak to other volunteer groups and understand what works and how to do it. I think with businesses, I think if you're a landlord, you have a responsibility to ensure that people you're renting to do the responsible thing, but more education, I think, with the council's help, would always be more welcome. And there are statistics, which I can't quote immediately, on the number of people who essentially are transitory in the borough, or who are new to the borough. It's how we engage with those people who don't necessarily understand it's wrong in what they're doing.
Chair, if I could just add one little nugget onto that. Tim took a bit of my thunder, unfortunately. The one thing we noticed over the last 18 months is, and Councillor talked about this, the civic pride. Over the last 18 months, everyone's had to talk to the neighbours again, after probably of trying to avoid them for the last 10 years. What we saw was fantastic, actually, because we saw an increase in community involvement. There are groups across the borough, some in Hounslow as well. Clean Up Hounslow is doing a really good job. Heston Action Group is doing a really good job. Cranford Action Group is doing a really good job. Feltham and Bloom are fantastic as well. I think a couple of them won awards at the Community Awards recently. We've seen that increase in community involvement again. And through our environmental champions, like Tim said, we've got over, I think it's about 160 now signed up. And we're getting them involved with each other as well as all of our services as well. Councillor Mallett, you talked about getting people talking to each other, getting people to tell people what's right and what's wrong. Effectively, we can do what we want. We can do what we can. We can put billboards up. We can do this and do that. But ultimately, we're the council, and we're the big bad council sometimes, telling people exactly what to do. What people listen to more is their neighbours telling them what to do. And by empowering the environmental champions with all of the information that we were trying to give every single resident in the borough, hopefully those 100-odd environmental champions can tell, their neighbours, who can tell their, family members or friends on the next road or the next ward, and eventually that message will get through to the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Vikram Garewal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim Sabeel, for all your hard work and the presentation today. I don't want to flatter you anymore because I think my colleagues have done enough of that. There's a couple of questions, and I'll make them as short as possible. I just note them down and try not to go over ground that's been covered with previous questions. So obviously, it's great to have you here because, especially on fly tipping, I was a chair of the Housing and Environment Scrutiny Committee in 2018, and my centrepiece for that year was on fly tipping. It's still a huge problem now. So what percentage of penalty notices, what percentage of fly tips, what's the percentage of penalty notices that have been issued off the back of them in Hounslow? Because if 40% are here, that's a very large sample size to then cut to say this is the percentage, councillors, that people are actually getting fined for fly tipping in our area. Because if I walk around Hounslow West or some parts of Hounslow Heath, especially Barrack Road near Hounslow West, that is by far in the worst condition I have seen in my lifetime from a fly tipping perspective. Literally, I drove down there 3 weeks ago and every few feet there was a fly tip. And I personally couldn't stop my vehicle to go and fix my street, which I'm addicted to report all of them. Because from a reactionary point of view, Hounslow Highway is second to none. But from a preventative point of view, I think there are questions to be asked. Because unfortunately we do not have a plethora of CCTV cameras to put everywhere and anywhere. Otherwise, all of us would want CCTVs on every corner of every street in our wards. But clearly Hounslow needs them if 40% of fly tips are here. So the percentage of penalties, that's the first question. Are we naming and shaming offenders? I'm not normally a fan of this, but this is something I raised in scrutiny in 2018, and I think it's something we need to do more. I think a few of the boroughs in North London do this incredibly well when they put it on their social media feeds, they put it in their publications, they name and shame fly tippers. I think that's something, and I said back then that we need to do that more, and Councillor Lambert, who's a lead member, who still is, said he would take it on board. So I want to see more of that. We've done it once or twice on our social media accounts, but not enough for what goes on. And people should be named and shamed. I completely agree with the transitory point with renters, especially in my ward at Hounslow Heath. Most of fly tipping does come from individuals that are just in the borough for 6 to 12 months and then leave, and they put most of their furniture out on the doorstep on their way out, and that's a real shame because it's hard to put civic pride in them if they're only here in a short period of time. But we need to do more, I think, with landlords to prevent that happening, especially on high turnover properties. So yeah, just some point on that side. From an environmental point of view, I completely agree with our view on weeds. But just like my colleagues, we've been inundated with complaints about them going out of control. It's great from an environmental perspective for us to implement a policy a few years before it will be mandatory. But unfortunately, it kind of makes us test dummies in a few ways. And our peers, our neighbouring peers, will learn from our mistakes, unfortunately, instead of learning together. And I think that's happened in this instance. Last question, because I've gone on enough. How do the conditions of our roads in Hounslow, in our wards, compare to other parts of the borough, in particular the affluent parts of the borough? Because when I drive in more of the affluent parts of the borough, their roads are in a far better condition than Hounslow. So how do we compare to them? Because sometimes I'm in some parts of the borough and I think it might be a different borough altogether. So that's a really important point. And if you could come back on that, that'd be great.
Can I answer some of those, please? I'll get you the percentage for the penalties. Like I said, the Special Waste Service has issued 534 FPNs to date across the borough, across their hotspot investigations. A lot of them were in Hounslow Central, Hounslow Heath, Hounslow South. So I'll get you the actual figure for that in a few days. Naming and shaming, we tried that a couple of years ago. Our information governance team is very prudent and got a little bit worried and scared about that. So we had to pull that. We are planning, and we've got approval from information governance now, because we had to. I'm an expert on GDPR now. We are going to be installing the crime and punishment page again, where we're capturing people who are fly tipping. Our comms team, there's a couple of comedians in there. They've got a few taglines ready to go on those websites. So that's going to go live again. We have asked the question whether we can actually publish the people who we've been fining. IG are still looking into that as well. There is a GDPR issue that they need to work through as well. Completely agree with you, Councillor Malik mentioned this as well. Landlords are a big influencer on what happens on the street in terms of the people that they get in and the tenancies that they're in as well. Tim talked about the transient rate a couple of years ago, and it's probably changed now. There was a study happened, 26,000 people in and out of the borough every single year. Now, that's a big percentage of people leaving the borough, but also coming in and not knowing how Hounslow works, our fortnightly collection, our weekly recycle collection, where to put their waste and things like that. So we need to get landlords to make sure that when they get a new tenant in, that they give them the right information and the new information and the correct information as well. They also need to tell us how many people they've got living in their properties, because if they tell us they've only got 3, when in reality they've only got 6, the waste recycling team will only give them 1 recycling bin, when probably they need 2. So there's a bit of work there. We have worked with our housing colleagues, and we have attended the Landlords Forum in the past as well. Everything's been quite virtual over the last year or so, but like this meeting's back in person. When the Landlords Forum comes back again in person, we will be there to talk to them. I'll let Tim talk about the condition of the roads. From the client point of view, the PFI reports across the borough. So we don't get an individual score for Hounslow, for Chiswick, for Felton, for Isleworth. And at the moment, across the borough, our score is meeting target, it's exceeding the target. It's a technical highway calculation, basically, what we call it, the net performance gap. The contract says it can't be lower than 0.67. At the moment, we're probably about 0.5. So actually, from an overall point of view, we're doing really, really well. Everyone will know that the London Technical Advisory Group State of the City report had Hounslow as number 1 in terms of our backlog for maintenance. So of all the 32 boroughs in London, we were the only one that didn't have a backlog. So in terms of repairs, Hounslow Highways are doing that on a regular basis, on time, and to spec as well. Okay, that's probably a benefit of the PFI. We are the only PFI in London. But still, to be named number 1 2 years in a row, to having the least backlog compared to some of our neighbours, Croydon in particular, was about 300% higher than us. In terms of comparing affluent, again, from a client point of view, I don't see Hounslow roads different to Isleworth or Chiswick roads. It's still a road within my borough, within our borough, that needs to be treated. Every survey is done on a yearly basis, and if it reaches that threshold of a low score, regardless of where it is, it will get maintained and we'll have some resurfacing. We have done some extra investment as a council with the pothole pledge, where we had this 4-year plan of asking residents to let us know where the worst roads were in the borough. And when they reported something to us, and when it got more than a couple of reports, that would flag a red flag to me to say, right, this needs some investment. From the last 2 years, we spent 1.6 million, I think it was. We went to Cabinet last month, and we got another 2 million to add on to the original 2 million budget. Carrington Avenue was the first road done earlier this week. There are a couple of other roads within Hounslow Central. Whitton Dean was done in August, and I drove Whitton Dean last week. There was a bit that I still want to do, because that is terrible. I could see China from some of the holes down there. But again, from a contract point of view, we don't differentiate. We don't put more money in there and less money in here. Money gets allocated equally.
So just stick on the asset condition. I think Sabil's pretty much summed it up, but essentially, we do not care which ward the road is in. The road is surveyed, so it's through a driven radar survey and also a visual survey to determine which defects are there. And on top of that, we also have routine safety inspection, which could be anything from monthly to annually on each road, which will pick up other ad hoc defects as they come through. All of that data is then churned into asset condition indices, which determines which road is done. And as Seville said, if it reaches a minimum level, then it gets done regardless. Otherwise, what we then do is make the investment decision based upon the long-term life cycle maintenance of that road. So essentially, it's investing at the right time. You don't invest when it's already failed, it's too late, it's too expensive to do that maintenance. You invest earlier so that you can maintain that asset as you go through. I think the one thing that might affect it is you go across the borough's geography and subsurface condition. So for example, in the west, you generally have a lot more concrete roads. And concrete, when it was put in, will last a lot longer and has a slightly different treatment, whereas maybe in the centre and potentially in the east, the ground condition may mean that it's more susceptible to small pothole damage. But other than that, there's no other determination. It's not political, it's entirely based upon us managing the asset for you for 25 years and investing that at the right time. And if there is any issue with the road, Hounslow Highways is the ones that bears the risk of paying that. So it's not a question of if we leave it long enough, we'll get paid more money. We have to do it regardless. Just very quickly on the weeds, I completely appreciate that Hanslow is doing something that other boroughs may benefit from. But the way I see it is we're making the right decision now, whereas others maybe aren't being brave enough to do that. So we are pathfinders. That does mean that we've got to learn from that. It does mean we're going to have to take some hits, but it also means that we've got that local learning ahead. So all of my operatives on the ground understand the situation earlier than anyone else will. Just in terms of fly tipping, the way I work it out, it's probably between 1% and 2% of reported fly tip numbers in terms of RFPNs issued. That doesn't account for the fact that probably, I would say, around another 50 or 100% of fly tips appear and get cleared. A lot of fly tipping goes next to bins. That will never get reported, it just gets cleared when the bin is cleared. So when we talk about fly tip numbers, that's what's reported through our website. We may be guilty in terms of our own success with Fix My Street. We created an excellent reporting tool, which makes it very easy to report a fly tip. So we probably get more reports and more accurate reporting than other boroughs would. I would say that we have a better understanding about where things are occurring than most other authorities. I think it's also fair to say that the type of fly tip that is put in place is different. It's now domestic waste. When we talk about fly tipping traditionally, and when we actually bid for this contract, we were told there were 350 fly tips a month to clear. We're now clearing around 3,000. It wasn't domestic waste. There was a clear all policy in 2013. Whatever waste you put outside of your property, the council cleared it. But the council again had to make the right brave decision, which we fully support, to encourage recycling. That meant encouraging residents to put less waste out, recycle more. A lot of investment was put in place to make that happen. I think that's one of those behaviours we're looking at. It's not a question of you don't need to fly tip, it's a question of don't you need to recycle? And that behaviour is probably a lot harder in flats. So a lot of investment has gone into these grit bins that we're putting in specific areas now to encourage people to want to dispose of the waste in the right place, allow it to be recycled without having to keep it within their own property.
Thank you. Okay, very quickly, I just wanted to ask, one of the graphs you put up there about weeds, yeah? The colour-coded chart. How come Chiswick and Austerley are green and Hounslow Central especially is red everywhere? What are we doing wrong and what are they doing right? So you've got...
Sorry, very quickly looking at if you compare to the previous year, the 4 wards in the centre reported less generally than the east. So it's actually, you probably under-reported last year. It could be that thing about, I think we did also benefit last year from the COVID factor. I think weeds may have been a little bit worse last year than people remember, but because we were worried about other things, a few weeds on a road didn't seem like a big deal then. Now we're all used to working at home a lot more. We're probably seeing our street in a very different way because we're spending more time on it. I also say, just to make it a bit worse, those are current year figures, so we've not finished 2021 yet. So when I did this graph about 4 weeks ago, it's only going to get worse. But we have to understand where we are to understand how we can improve. So we're being very honest about the statistics.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to ask the public if you would like to ask any questions. Sandy?
It's about the removal of large waste. surely it would be cheaper to not put a cost on that, because some of the large items, especially in HMOs when people move out, are mattresses, are fridges, this sort of thing. A lot of those people haven't got the money to pay for removal of large objects, and therefore it would be much better if it was a free charge that people could book. I mean, the landlords responsible for those HMOs could then use it rather than having to organise it with some of their tenants, because it's going to continue to happen while there is so much turbulence in the people that come through this borough. The other thing I have noticed, which has been quite disturbing recently, is that a lot of the plastic bags that are given out for people to put clothing in and leave outside for collection are not collected, and the residents don't take them in, and therefore the bags split and there's stuff all over the roads. I don't know whether there's something you can do with the organisations that are leaving the bags to see if they could, take more responsibility for what happens.
So I've just gone on the website. The bulky waste is £40 for 5 items. I will take your suggestion back to the waste recycling team. And I've understood now this is the charity that gives their white bags out to say leave your bags on the Tuesday or something like that. Again, I'll find out what we can do in terms of some influence, because waste recycling team won't take them, but if they're not taken by this charity, they're just left out there. I'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's me again. I've just got 2 things. On the estate we live, Bravazon, the road, you keep filling the potholes up. In my view, it needs retarmacking, because you fill the holes up and then within a month you need to come back out and do them. We've had several holes that have been there a couple of months, and they're right where your tyres run down because there's cars parked either side. And the second thing is Henley's Alley. That is pardon my language, a shithole. Young ladies, women can't walk down there because you've got drug dealers, there's lighting's bad, there's rubbish. I'm on Heston West Big Local Board, so we used to do litter picking down there. It's just so much rubbish because the residents keep throwing it over the fence. It's one of those things that is the borders where you own part land, some land's not owned by council. It's a constant battle. And you've got McDonald's at the bottom of the road. They're constantly coming up there and picking their litter up. Something needs to be done, because you've got overhanging weeds as well. It's a constant battle. I don't know what else to say. People won't walk down there. Well, it's a mess.
Just to know on Henley's Alley, Moon's Alley, whatever you want to call it, obviously it starts from Brabazon Road, it goes down towards Henley's Roundabout where the M&S and McDonald's are. The top 10 to 20 yards is adopted highway, and the bottom 10 to 20 yards is adopted highway. The bit in the middle is privately owned. And it's privately owned by the Rectory Farm, whoever owns Rectory Farm, and who's ever got that good idea of gravelling and making this new park kind of thing. Okay. Fine. So actually, like I said, that is adopted highway. We should be cleaning that, so we'll take that back. Absolutely. So, regarding Brabazon, are you reporting on Fix My Street, or is this just something that you've noticed that Tim's crews are coming in and out, constantly doing it?
We haven't seen Tim's crews going in at all.
Okay.
We've got a friend that lives where these potholes are who works for the council. She reports it, but we don't see it happening.
So on that one, the best thing to do is report it through Fix My Street. So if anybody reports a pothole through Fix My Street, a highways inspector will attend, will review the location, identify if the pothole needs immediate repair or repair on a permanent basis, or if actually it's on the renewal list. They have a very strict measure that they go by, and they have a safety strategy inspection manual, so they have to apply by that. Because from our perspective, I guess very selfishly, if somebody has an accident at that location, we are responsible for anything that comes from that. That's aside from the moral obligation about doing the right thing. Just financially, That's the way it works. So the best thing to do is always report it, because then you get an understanding that's been given to someone to make a decision, and that decision can then be queried afterwards. Okay?
We also get the H28 that runs around each day as well. So
Yeah.
you can imagine the footfall going around.
I honestly don't think there's a pothole problem in Hounslow. I think there are some problem roads. I think there's an issue with delamination in some roads, which you don't consider to be an issue because it's more visual rather than safety related. But it doesn't mean there aren't potholes. But we do have so few that if they do get reported, they should be actioned within a good time period. Regarding Henley's Alley, I apologise for that if it hasn't been cleaned properly. I do think it comes under the 400 areas that we're looking, because there is this constant gripe from us as well that something comes in and it seems to be someone else that's responsible. And the project that Spiel's working on is saying, it doesn't really matter whose it is in Hounslow. Let's just work together to make it happen. And I think that's one of those sections.
If I may just end, because I think you do want us to end.
No.
If I can urge all councillors and all residents, any issue on the public highway, report it on Fix My Street. Fix My Street, the mobile app, available on Android and iOS, I think it's called. And the website, which is fms.hounslowhighways.org. Anything reported there gets logged, gets triaged, gets assigned, and there is a record from my point of view to audit as well afterwards.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We've taken up much more of your time than we said we would, but thank you very, very much. And with that, we'll move to any other item, which I want to thank the MS Society for being here. Did you want to say a few words?
Thank you for having us. We're a newly reformed group. The last group was 5 years ago. So I was diagnosed in 2019. Myself and my wife, found that there wasn't a support group locally. So we are trying to get everybody that is diagnosed with MS. There's about 200 to 600 patients in the borough. Our biggest battle is the Asian community. They don't seem to want to engage with us. I'm hoping coming here tonight, the councillors will spread the word that we are here to help you guys. We've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. There's a couple of councillors that we are following. We want your support. You may see us out on the street. We've got a gazebo, which has been kindly supported by Hounslow Borough. So it's got your logo on it and our logo on it as well. So if you know anybody that's got MS, please point them our way. We've got some business cards. We've got some stuff if you'd like to have it. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. We will, of course, support you in any way we possibly can. Thank you. Anybody? No? Well, thank you so much for coming. And all that remains to be said, that once again, I do invite the public to send in their questions to the open forum, and we will answer your questions. So please do come along to the open forum, send in your questions, because as Councillor Bruce said, we want to be transparent and we will answer your questions. You may not like the answers, but you'll get them anyway. So thank you very much. Please do send in your answers. And thank you everyone for attending. The next date for the area forum is 27th of January. No. Yes. Yep. That's right. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'll tell you why it threw me. It says 27th of January 2021. So it'll be 27th of January 2022. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.